in the area of Switzerland that we were in, it was French speaking, and the only English speaking university there was like a liberal arts school. So I would probably be learning like something like journalism or international relations or something. But they also had an art school there. But it was taught entirely in French. You can probably imagine what I ended up
Yeah.
picking because I love a challenge and I hate my. It's time for Gavin Doodle.
Woo! Hello, internet. Hello, people. Um, Welcome to a Thursday night. Which, whoa, what'd I just do? I'm trying to mess with my feet. Hey, you get to look at my eye while I try to get my feet up and running. There we go. Okay, everybody, hello. It is a Thursday night, which means we have a lovely Gavin Doodle ahead of us. I'm going to put in the Ask Us Anything into the chat here. We have a guest who is already sitting there watching, and I'm going to let them in just a second. Let me just put this on here, and then we will get going quickly because I believe they may not be able to stay on all night because they have a little one they might have to take care of. So, anyways, welcome everybody. Hopefully, we don't have as many internet problems as we did last time. We're going to be making some fun work tonight, and we will start, and I'm just going to let our guest in and get going. So let's do that. Here we go. Here's the request. I'm going to hit accept. This is the time where I take a little drink of water. Ooh. Why is it? Hold on. It keeps closing the accept. So, oh, it got it. Okay, beautiful.
Hello, hello.
Hello.
How are
I was,
you?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm tired, but otherwise super excited to be here.
You're tired already, and we barely even
I've
started.
been
Um,
tired since I woke up this morning.
yeah, I woke up at like 4 this morning and couldn't get back to sleep,
Oh
and
no,
so
that's not.
I'm running on fumes too. So we'll manage with it, and we'll be weird and whatnot. Um, Thank you for joining us tonight. I am well, not just I am. Our whole household is fans of yours. We have books. That's my not. Let's try that again. That's not my name. And
Yay.
you have to. I'm gonna try to pronounce the name. So the story here, for anybody that doesn't know this, is about a little girl whose name people can't pronounce.
Mhm.
And this is a thing that has always hit me hard as a teacher. Of I try to say the names as properly as I can,
Mhm.
but I have a Midwest accent, and I's and E's are hard to deal with. So is it Mirha?
Yeah, that's America.
Yeah. Okay. I was like, I'm
Yeah,
gonna probably massacre it, but lovely book. And then the one that, of course, probably
thank
a lot of
you.
people have seen that is adorable is Lost Stick.
Thank
Um,
you.
that is so colorful and bright. And I have questions about all of that and how you
Ooh,
maintain
okay.
your colors, because this is collage. Some of this is collage, correct?
Most of,
Most.
yeah, like 90% of it is
Okay.
collage.
So we got to talk colors because reproduction of colors that I get sometimes are not always the best,
Mhm.
and so I want to talk to you about that. But we are so excited to have you on.
I'm super happy to be here. Oh my
Great,
gosh. It's so great.
great.
Excited.
I'm I I know that you are tired, and I'll try to get to this so we can just like move along and you can start painting and whatnot. But there are lots of people watching already, lots of your fans. But there's going to be a few people that are going, "Who is this person?" And if they're saying that, they're absolutely living under a rock, and they don't know they don't know anything. But can you give us a quick synopsis in your words about sort of who you are and what you do?
Sure. I like to call myself a woman of many hats because I like to do a lot of things. So primarily, I work as a children's book author and illustrator. I have illustrated 40 book projects in my career so far, and recently I've started writing as well. I have my third book coming out like in 2 weeks.
Okay.
And apart from the illustration stuff, I've also worked as a character designer for animation. I also am a bit of an art educator as well. I am a huge proponent for free, accessible art education, especially on the boring side of things, so like the businessy stuff, financy stuff that every working artist should know.
Needs.
Unfortunately, like
Yeah.
I always thought that like, being an artist, I would never have to touch math
Oh,
again. But unfortunately, it's I'm working on my taxes
I
right now and I'm so
was gonna
upset.
say, you're in Canada, right?
I'm I recently moved to the
Oh,
US,
you
and
did. Okay.
so this year
Okay.
I have to do those dual taxes, right? I'm losing my mind. It's really tough.
We just did ours the other day, and I was teaching the students that I have about taxes and sort of explaining deductions and all those kinds of things. And it is um, a whirlwind of numbers that hit you, and you don't know exactly what to do with them. And I can imagine, like, I work in a different state from where I live, and that can be a little challenging. But I
Yeah.
imagine the Canadian, especially since you moved. You said you moved this last year, right? So, or within the
Yeah.
year. Yeah, so
Hmm.
that's got to be a nightmare to deal with. But um, the what was I say, the mini hats thing? Yes, I know. I wear a lot of hats, but you also have a little one, which probably adds a lot of
Yes.
stress.
The little hat, he is 8 months now. He's up, I can hear him crying. My husband is
Oh,
putting him down for bedtime. But thankfully I don't have to deal with it today.
okay.
Yeah, so that's been a really big adjustment as well. Like at the beginning of the year, I decided I wanted to go back to work because I love my job and I wanted
Yeah,
to make books again. But 2 months in, it's a lot.
you
So
said
I'm gonna tone it down a bit.
40 books. How many years have you been doing it?
This is my 10th year.
So you're doing roughly about 4 books a year.
Yes. I'm doing fewer books now, bef even
Yeah.
prior to baby, I started doing fewer books because I'm sure starting beginning of my career, I was saying yes to everything because I
Yep.
was taking on a lot of low paying gigs and I kind of had to. But so that was like 4 or 5 in a year, and then eventually once I got better projects, then that's more like two in a year.
That
But
still explains
now
why you're tired.
probably one.
That explains why you're tired. Even at
Hmm.
one at this point, you burnt yourself out for many years, and now you're
Yeah.
now it's time to put the brakes on and say, okay, wait, quality of life situation.
Honestly,
Um,
yeah.
so tonight we're going to be making, and I don't know, I don't remember if we talked about it in the DM, but sort of, do you know what you're making tonight?
It could be one of two things. I have a book project that I have to finish by the end of the month, and then
Okay.
after that, I am free. So I could be, logical thing would be to continue working on that, so I'm
Yep.
done with my deadline early. But I could also take a fun drawing
Okay.
break. I'm doing like a big um rebrand of my website, so I thought it'd be fun to do like a bunch of little doodles for it. And I think that could be
Okay.
fun. That would be easy. I don't have to think for that.
Use I tend to use this these Thursday nights as a way to just try things and have fun. And I know that in my schedule, I assume it's similar in such a way for you that the opportunity to just say I don't care about what it's for. I'm just making something fun is always like such a nice relief
I love
in the
that.
middle of a stressful month or week or year or what have you. Um, so I always advocate for that, but I understand if you got to work on work, that also can lead
No, you know
to
what? I'm tired. Let's do like a little fun break.
okay. Um,
What are you
and then
working on?
oh, well, thank you for asking. Um, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do tonight, and I was looking into some folklore stuff. And there's this folk tale, an American folk tale about a guy named Alfred Bulltop Stormalong,
Ooh,
who
okay.
is, yeah, a lot of people don't know him, but he's sort of like a Paul Bunyan type, like a 30-foot tall
Mhm.
man who had a ship that's so tall his mast had to be folded in half to avoid the moon.
Oh man.
And like it's really sort of fun stuff like that. And like he got caught in the white cliffs of Dover are white because they had to grease them so they could get the ship through the English Channel.
That's fun.
And like
Okay.
there's some fun little stuff like that. So I was gonna try playing around. I wanted to draw someone with long legs. That's really what it is. I want to draw someone long legs, so I found a story
Love
behind
it.
it. And I don't know what direction it's going to go 100%, but that's the evening. But the other question that I ask, and there's probably a lot of people who are going to wonder about this because I already saw someone ask, like, okay, yeah, let's talk about color. What are we using for materials tonight?
Ooh. Um, that's a good question. Either my iPad, which I know is boring, or
Mm-mm.
I do have, no, that's fine.
iPad's totally
I
fine if
have,
that's what you like.
okay, alright. Otherwise I have like, I bought a new notebook the other day, and I have like my pens that I haven't used in a while, so maybe like ink stuff.
Anything is fair game. We've had people on who have been on screen, like on their computer. We've had people doing iPad. We've had people playing with materials. The only thing I ask when it comes to the iPad is, do you have a certain brush set that you use? Like, because material
Ooh,
wise,
I'll
I can go like,
definitely
what?
share what I usually use the default brushes, but I can if I ever use anything different, then I'll mention
Yeah, yeah. Throw it out there for people because they're always going like, how do I get that exact line, or how do I
it.
get that? Um, and so, yeah, anything is fair game. It's whatever feels comfortable to you. The night is meant to be
All right.
casual, and we'll chat and talk. But the only other little things that I say, and I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time because I do know
Mhm.
you have time constraints that I want to be mindful of, and so I want to get moving relatively quickly towards the artwork. But I will state we had internet issues last time when I had
Ooh,
Oyvind on. I don't know if you saw how how problematic it was. Everything was blurry for minutes and whatnot. If something like that happens again, we'll reboot and try to get going. And at any point you want to stop,
mhm.
whether it be because you're tired or you hate me, and we will send you off in a lovely send off. But I am so happy to have you here today, and sort of mesmerized by your work over the years. And so anytime you can spare with us is wonderful. So
Yay. Oh yeah. Let's get started.
get going. Okay, so I do have a feed here. It's got like a 10-second delay, but I will watch on the camera as well as you set up to make sure that we're all set up okay. And then we can just start. And what I will do is, as you set up, I ask this question. Here, I'll do the same thing as I set up. I asked the question about sort of the beginnings, and I saw a few people talk about sort of in the questions already that have shown up about sort of your entrance to or your experience jumping into the world of illustration. And can you give us? I know it's kind of a sort of rudimentary question to ask, like, why do you like art, and how did you get started? But can you give us a little background just to contextualize?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I actually love this question. I love hearing it from every artist because I find that like everyone has their own specific journey. And so I kind of fell into illustration where initially I had really wanted to go into animation. I was living in the Middle East at the time, and I fell in love with the world of animation and art. And prior to that, in high school, I had no idea that like being an artist was like a job that someone could have, right? I was only, just culturally speaking, the only jobs that I had heard of was like, doctor, lawyer, whatever. And so I fell in love with art, and I decided that I really wanted to potentially try to pursue it. Initially, my parents were not pleased with that. So
Yeah.
I
When you say culturally speaking, meaning that just the culture that you were in, the art was not seen as
um
um,
well, more like in a lot of like Asian cultures, this whole starving artist mentality. I'm like
yeah.
the first
Okay.
artist in my family, so my parents were well-meaning, and they just wanted me to be, set. And they didn't know any artists, and so that's why.
Yeah.
Although I wanted to go to art school, initially we kind of reached the compromise that I would go to school to study visual communication, which is
Okay.
essentially doing branding for
Yeah.
businesses. Pretty far off from art. I did that for a semester, hated it, and I dropped out. Um,
How did your
I
how
came,
did your parents feel about that right there when they?
uh, they they weren't super thrilled, but
Okay.
I don't know. I made like a really big fuss about it. And I was the school that I was at was away from home. It was abroad, and so they were they were happy that I came back home. So I did like a gap semester where I was doing absolutely nothing. And then at that time, because of my dad's job, he moved around a lot when I was growing up. My family moved to Switzerland, and so I kind of followed them over there. And I had to figure out a new place to study. And
Yeah.
in the area of Switzerland that we were in, it was French speaking. And the only English speaking university there was like a liberal arts school. So I would probably be learning like something like journalism or international relations or something. But they also had an art school there. But it was taught entirely in French. You can probably imagine what I ended up
Yeah.
picking because I love a challenge and I hate myself and I didn't know any French, but I was like, no, this time I'm gonna do it. I don't care.
It speaks
So,
to sort of
um,
the universal like art shines through it all situation.
yeah,
Like it doesn't matter if you speak the same language, if your visual communication works, or the piece works just visually. You
exactly.
don't need the word to solve it.
So it's
Um,
funny that you say that because the school had an animation program and that's what I applied to, and I didn't get in because my French was too bad. Um, but they said that like, okay, we have an illustration program and we think that, you might be able to get by in that. So why don't you join the illustration program for a year, let your French get better, and then maybe next year we'll think about it. But I ended up really liking um, the illustration stuff. And I thought that like, it might serve me well, learning about like color and all character design and all that sort of stuff, and could still be useful for my pursuits in animation.
when
So,
when you're saying animation, was the animation stuff that was commercial based, or were you interested in the more of the like the fine art? I'm wondering why like the separation in that school saying you'd be good in illustration but not animation, purely based on language alone, or
so it was more that like, like in the classes and stuff, I just would not have understood anything in like their lectures and things.
oh
But at least in the illustration program, I could kind of get by on just vibe. I don't know. Like the
okay.
language of art would have, I don't know. For whatever reason, they allowed me to go into
I
illustration.
understand the
Um,
illustrators have cool vibes, and those animators
we
totally
do.
totally stiff and rigid. Yeah.
Yeah, so essentially I did that program for for like that full 3 years, and then I moved to and then like in that program I also learned about children's illustration because I loved a lot of animation artists, and I found that some of my favorite ones were also children's illustrators. So people like Brittany Lee and Annette Marna and Mary Blair, who kind of like were in both worlds, and I was really inspired by them. So anyway, I discovered children's illustration there. Then in my last year of school, when I was there, I joined an illustration agency that kind of like fell into that. Kind of found them online. I applied to them, and so when I graduated, I moved to Canada and I got my first job in animation there, and also my first gig in children's books. And so, if people are curious on how I got my first gigs, there were essentially two uh, main projects. I guess like two routes that I took. One of them was that through the agency. Um, when I found them at the Bologna Children's Book Fair that I attended.
Yeah.
And I had a portfolio with me of like a mock children's picture book that I made. And through that portfolio, I landed that agency. And through them, I found my first gig. It just kind of worked out
Is
that way.
is
Um,
that the agency that you're with now, or was that a different one?
no,
Okay. I was
this
like, what?
is.
I wasn't going to ask the name until I knew that question because maybe there's you know history or whatnot. But I was so you have that agent. Do you the new one is I'm trying to think who are you with? You're with is it
I'm with Full
Full
Circle
Circle?
Literary currently.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's first I'm with a literary agent right now. Initially, I was with an illustration agency. I do not recommend them, but I'm not going
Yes,
to.
yeah, yeah,
I don't know if I should mention
yeah.
them or not. Just
No, no, no.
drama.
Yeah, we'll stay away. You can
Um,
DM me later. How about that? You can
sure.
give me the scoop later. But yeah, I would
Yes.
say stay away. Yeah. Um,
Yeah. So anyway, that was I found one project through that, and then another gig I had found. These three kind of like all happened around the same time. At the Bologna Children's Book Fair, I came across a publisher, Flower Pot Press. It was like a small indie publisher, and I had done a portfolio review with them, and they did like my stuff, and they were like, "Okay, we'll reach out maybe." And I heard back from them a year and a half later and for a book
okay.
project. So yeah, that's how I got another gig. So lesson from that story is that because I know like a lot of people will be like, oh,
Yeah,
like I haven't heard
yeah.
back from so and so, and I don't know if maybe it's not going to work out. But sometimes, especially with like books, it's all
Yes.
about right project, right time,
There
right?
was
Maybe they don't have anything for you
there was
then,
the
but
time where I after I graduated college, I made a postcard, like my first postcard. This was back when postcards were sent all the time, and I sent out this postcard. 10 years later, I got
oh my God.
a call from some publisher. It was a children's magazine that was interested in working with me. And I, at the time, I was always asking everybody, "Where'd you find my stuff?" To kind of like track
Hmm.
where things are, where the advertising or whatnot is working. And they mentioned that postcard from 10 years prior, and the best part of it was that postcard did not have anything about my website. It had the only contact information was an old email that I don't use and an old phone number that I was no longer attached to. And
Wow.
somehow they still found me 10 years later for work. Um,
That's amazing.
yeah, I was floored when it was that long of a period of time. But it's that same sentiment of like, you never know where it's going to come from. You never know when. And the idea is to network and to be in touch with people and not lose track of all of that because it's going to show up in weird times or weird places. You're going to run into someone in a situation that surprises you with that kind of like an offer for a job that you weren't
Hmm.
expecting or you lost track of. um, with
Yeah.
the jump into the kidlit, I see there's lots of questions that people have been asking and I want to make sure I get to those too, but the jump into kidlit, did you feel like it was a better fit for you long term in the sense of you have this vision for animation, and you had mentioned like illustration really sort of connected, but did you miss anything, or was there anything that you're like uh, looking back at animation, or since you're doing character design now and doing stuff for animation, do you still miss the like movement aspect of animation, or do you get fulfillment from the picture book range in some way that like sort of eases that desire?
Oh, uh, ooh. So one thing that I didn't get to in what I was saying earlier
Oh,
is
go
that
ahead. Yeah,
initially
yeah, yeah.
when w- um after I graduated, I had no interest in working in publishing. It was just I was like working in animation, and then the books projects were kind of just like falling into my lap where like it was coming up, and I thought they were fun, but I didn't really think anything of it. And then eventually, after my first gig ended, and I was unemployed for a very long time and applying to a lot of animation studios and getting rejected and rejected and rejected, I was still doing book projects, but I was low key embarrassed by it.
Interesting.
And the
Yeah,
mentality was that, like, I didn't know anyone in publishing that. I was not in that sphere. Like, all of my friends were in animation. And
yeah.
so, to me, like I was just embarrassed that like I was unemployed and I was working on something that kind of felt like a consolation prize. Um, And it's really weird to think about right now because like I love my job. And this was like the best fit for me, but it was just like what I felt at the time. And so I was working on these books kind of reluctantly, and also didn't help that with that first agency that I was working with, I was getting paid pennies,
Yeah.
like not
Yeah.
being treated very well. So that was like another thing that I didn't see like a future long term in it. But it wasn't until I left that agency and I started getting a couple of book projects where I really enjoyed, and was seeing a lot of potential. I even won an award for a book that I was like, wait a minute, this is actually something that I could be really good at. Um, but at the time, I was still working on trying to get a job in animation, just kind of like the stubbornness of it. But eventually, I kind of reached a crossroads where I was like, I can't be holding on to something that doesn't really make sense for me. Because I also realized that I like being my own boss. I like working on books where I have the freedom to work on my own style. I get to work on projects that are super diverse and really speak to me, which I wasn't really getting the chance to in animation. And so I kind of made the switch then. And yeah, that's like what really drew me to illustration, and I'm so happy that I did. I
Never,
love my job. So
never looked back after that. Never said I shoulda, woulda, coulda, because you're doing it at this point. Do you think,
yeah.
sir? I will warn you that in these conversations, I get a little philosophical and like therapeutic in my questions. But I was gonna say, do you think any of that, like that hesitation in sort of all in on illustration at the beginning, had anything to do with sort of a holdover of, the um, like the equivalent of not succeeding in, well, not, I shouldn't say not succeeding, but having a challenge succeeding in the animation world, and sort of the relationship of that to something like mentioning your parents or the societal sort of impact of art, or going into something where if you don't achieve the thing that you were aiming for, that there's that you have failed, or that you have not succeeded, without acknowledging the reality of the successes that you had along the way.
Yep, 100%. Like there were definitely two of those things going on where like one, I didn't want to be seen as a failure that like, oh, I couldn't hack it, I couldn't get a job. I'm running away and pursuing something else because
Yeah.
I just wasn't good enough. So I felt like I didn't want to admit that, even though that wasn't what the case was. I just realized, that there was a different pursuit that was better for me. So there's that, the fear of failure. And then the other thing was I didn't consider illustration to be a job in the sense that, again, I didn't know any
Yeah.
freelancers. And so, at least with animation, although it was like an artistic career, it was like a 9 to 5 job. You had benefits, you would go into the office, you had coworkers. But when I was doing my books, I was just at home working in my pajamas, and I didn't feel like I was at work, like I was just doodling. I
Yeah.
don't
Yeah.
know. So it's like that holdover was still there. I think that was like one of the reasons why, like, oh, like I wasn't taking it
Well,
seriously. Um,
I think, even outside of the context of what you're talking about in your situation, I think that's a challenge for artists in general, to like to have your site so, and forgive me because I may be putting words in your mouth here, but the idea of having your site so honed in on a singular vision of what things, or how it's supposed to work out, that you miss the other pathways, or the other um,
mhm.
the room to grow in another direction that may be more natural or maybe more fun, but because it's not the thing you were expecting, you sort of not necessarily shun it, but that you don't open your eyes fully to it as you go along. I mean, I know I see that with students all the time, of that, like it's a little difficult. You said you teach on the, or a lot of business, or you try to relay that,
Mhm.
and I do that quite a bit. But also a lot of the work that I do is with seniors, and sort of like wrapping up their career in school, and having to look holistically at their work,
Mhm.
and some of them
Mm,
can't see the pathway that's so clear for the teachers.
right.
Or like, oh, you'd be so perfect in this industry, and you're
But
doing
you
so
can't tell
great
them.
with it. Yeah, and well, we can tell them, but it's also it's the challenge of, if we say that, you have to be very tactful
Hmm.
in how you say it, but also there's a tendency of people to sort of um, to want to stick to the guns because of that sort of, again, societal, like, if I don't
Right.
succeed in this one thing, I haven't succeeded at all. And in reality, we're going like, no, you will succeed if you do this. And it may not be the thing that you came for, but this is the thing that you will get a career in long term.
Hmm.
Um, looking back, if you could go back to that time frame where you were sort of where that challenge was in your head, is there anything that you would like immediately go and say to yourself, like, what is the sage wisdom that you would relay to the young you that would uh, maybe get you past that hurdle faster?
Oh man, I think a couple of advices that I would give is to say yes to opportunities when they come to you. Like, don't be so rigid in that sense, like exactly what you're saying, where, if you have, as they say, when one door closes, another one opens. And if
Yeah.
you cut yourself off from like any open door, like that's like an invitation for something amazing potentially, right? Like even if it might not be the original path that you wanted to go on, like it could be something that's even better for you that you just don't know. Um,
Is there?
like I've,
I
yeah.
was gonna say, is there anything in your career so far that you look at and you go, "Oh, I was really surprised I had the chance to do this. Like I never saw this." Like, in other words, that door that opened up for you. Is there anything that you look back and go like, "Man, I never would have imagined that I'd be in this place now, beyond just picture books"? Like, are there any like weird things? Like, I know, like, sometimes people have products and they have things that, like, I had one of my books that I worked on got turned into a game, and I was like,
Ooh,
so
that's
cool to see
cool.
my work in a game format that I never would have expected. Or I had a former student on the other day, and their work was made into a dog toy.
That is so fun.
And yeah, so like, is there anything like that in your career history that you look back and go, "Oh, this is so cool that I got to do in the
Well, I
process"?
have it right
Oh
here.
yeah,
So I'm
do
gonna
share,
move
do
my
share.
thing in a second. The couple 2 years ago, or almost 3 years ago, I did a line of products for Target, which I would have never
That's right.
imagined doing something like
Uh,
that. That was like a really big dream project. Um, and that was really cool because like, your work is in stores. That's really amazing. But also I tapped into like a completely different audience where I'm usually pretty much always working on stuff for kids. And I love kids, but it is a very niche audience.
yeah,
And I mean, like, if you think about like with I mean, it's one thing for like chapter books and middle grade books and everything, but like with picture books, it's usually parents who are buying them for kids. So you don't really have picture book fans per se. And I don't know, like I like that with my work in Target, I was reaching an audience of older people, and I really like that like my friends could go to the store and be like, "Oh my gosh, we saw Anoosha stuff."
yeah, and it's
So
it's
I
not
thought
just
that
gonna
was
sit on
really
a
fun.
bookshelf.
Yes.
Yeah, it's gonna
Or
happen.
or get eaten by a baby.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
The
so that's something that I'm potentially trying to pursue more of, um, maybe in the coming years, because that was really fun.
Was that something that Target reached out to you? Was that something that you targeted? That How did that
That I
come to be?
targeted.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, yeah. Pun.
Um,
I guess pun intended.
well, that was they
They
found me.
found you. Okay.
I don't know the specifics. Like, I have found that this line that they do every year for Christmas, it's mostly has been children's illustrators. So I must have been on someone's radar for whatever reason. I wish when people ask like, oh, like how do I do this? Like I wish
Yeah.
I knew because I would love to work with them again, but like I don't know how to make a lightning strike twice. I don't know.
So, so
The
they came
best
to
advice
your
I can give is to like
agent though.
they came to me
Oh,
directly.
directly to you. Okay. Okay. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Why would they go to Full Circle Literary? That makes sense. Okay, never mind.
Yes.
I did
My
not
agent did
connect with
help
that.
out with the contract,
Yeah.
just like pro bono, but they came to me.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Um, it's one of those things where like seeing the ability of an illustrator, especially in the kidlit world, there's sometimes bad assumptions that all you do is draw pictures for little kids, or there's contextually how do you branch out, and then seeing something like that when you see a product or you see things that sort of extend beyond outside of the literary world and how easily it transitions is always so nice and rewarding to see that
Hmm.
you don't have to live in or you don't have to drive in one lane for the entirety of your career, or you don't have to sort of be a niche artist, that you can actually
Yes.
branch out in general. Um, a couple of I know that folks asked about color, and I want to ask you about color
Sure.
and sort of there when I look at your work, and I mentioned it in the postings and things that I put up, but your work is, color is a star
Thank you.
across the board. Like when I look at your work, I mean, maybe it's there, but I don't expect to see a ton of black and white stuff. I sort of like, I'm expecting to see bright, colorful, wonderful
Hmm.
colors pop up in your work. Um, and I'm wondering, have you, has that been always the sort of bread and butter of how you work, or is that something that you've gotten more and more confident in, and has become I mean, maybe it's not anything you even care about and it just happens to be naturally just shows up, but I'm wondering your approach or your thought on color and how you apply it to your work.
Sure. Yeah, I don't think I'm much of like a black and white ink artist. I feel like I do need to have color to give like that extra je ne sais quoi, the pattern, the
Ooh,
depth,
you are
whatever.
from Canada and
Um,
France. I
yes.
heard it right.
And so in terms of approach, like I wish I could tell you that like I have a lot of skill about like color theory and like how things should be paired and like the science of stuff. But as I mentioned, my French was really bad, and if they taught me anything in that school, I did not understand it. Any worksheets they gave out, anything they said in class, like I did not absorb any of it. So mostly it's just if I'm working, it's if I will improvise a lot. So if I'm painting something, initially I'll go in with the intention of like, okay, what vibe do I want something to be? Like, do I want something to be more vibrant or like a bit more mature? Do I want something to be more warm toned, or what emotion am I trying to evoke and whatever? Or maybe like I'll come up with one single color that I'm feeling like, okay, this is what I really want to do. And then I'll pick maybe an orange that I really like today,
Yeah.
just an orange. Then I have to like think of all the other colors. So I like to use like Procreate's like little whoops, the little swatches that they have. I pick a couple of my favorite colors that I always just keep on hand. So then after I have that first color, then maybe I'll pick up the next color that I want to use. So I have a brown for the skin. But then I see that brown next to the orange, and I'm like, okay, you know what? Something's not right. I have to tweak something, whether that's the orange or the brown. I'll play around, play around, make it darker, lighter, more vibrant, whatever, until something fits. And then that's just what I do. I just
So
keep playing around with it until it seems correct.
let me see if I can try out a little French here in this question. What is the color du jour? Did I
Ooh,
say that right? The
yes, it is
the,
the color
the
du jour.
the color of the day. What is the color right now? Like you have, I've been gravitating. I've been working in Holbein acrylic gouache, and recently I came across this color of mustard, which
Ooh,
is like just a
I
really rich yellow. It's
love it.
almost I mean, it's more mustard than like lemon yellow of any sort, but and I'm really in love with it at this point. But 2 weeks ago that wouldn't have been the color. It would have been something else. And so I'm wondering, do you have a color du jour, a color that you
That
sort
is
of like?
that's a great question. I haven't been doing a lot of color related work recently, but I will agree that like I'll have color du jours. Like I'm just like trying to look at like my other projects that I had. Like with Lost Stick, my color du jour was specifically the Prussian blue paint that I have that I modeled the entire palette just based off of like, oh, I love this paint color. I
Yeah.
want to use it as much as
And how do
possible.
you make all the other
Um,
colors work with it versus? Yeah,
exactly.
gotcha, gotcha.
Um, if I have any color du jours right now, it's I'm leaning more towards kind of like neon-ish colors, which is very unusual for me. I usually stay super clear of like those really bright fluorescent colors. Like I've never been a fan of them. But Genevieve Godbout, the illustrator, has a
Yes,
beautiful book coming
yes, they did.
out.
Oh, coming out. I was gonna say the Deer
Or maybe it's
Bookstore.
already out.
Are you talking about Deer Bookstore?
I think it's Dear Bookstore, the one with like that bright fluorescent
Yes,
yellow.
that's Deer Bookstore. It's out already, at least
It's
in the
out already.
U.S. Oh, we just got it this last weekend, and it is stunning. Absolutely
It's so
stunning.
beautiful. It's very like, and I would never think to use a color like that, but just seeing that, it makes me like, ooh, like let's try something different. That looks really fun.
Even tonight, because I just got that book and I was looking at her work and whatnot, I was like, oh, it's all pastels and stuff. So I dug deep in my supplies here and grabbed out some pan pastels that I'm going to throw in the mix tonight.
Ooh,
A long time, and I'm not going to use them anywhere near as beautiful as what she did in that book. But yeah, if you can get your hands on that one, oh boy, that one it's even better in
exciting.
person.
I have a question for you.
Yes,
How
go
do
for
you
it.
use pan pastels?
How do you use pan pastels? Have you never used them?
I've never used them before. I had never heard of them until I saw her book process. And yeah, so it's an entirely new medium for me.
Yeah, it's Rebecca Green. I asked Rebecca Green back in the day, sort of how she was getting some soft tones, and
Hmm.
I was thinking it was all just like colored pencil or something of the sort. And she said, "Oh, go
Right.
get yourself some pan pastels." So I went out and got some. I just bought like a stockpile of them to sort of play around with. And I don't know if you can see the screen at all right now,
Yeah,
but they come
so
in these little
cool.
like nice cakes, and you can get multiple different things. These like little sponge, they're like makeup sponges essentially. Um, and you can use it and just put down the pastel that way. They have little palette knives like this that I have
Hmm.
with little. You can buy like packs of these little spongy tips to them, so you can be a little bit more controlled as you work. But the thing that I like about them is, one, they're not as powdery as regular pastels,
Hmm.
and I think they erased a little bit better. Um, the hard part for me is, um, and I'm going to find out tonight because I'm going to work on top of something that has a little bit of texture because I'm putting down some tracing paper that has some wrinkles and it might pick up those wrinkles pretty heavily. But it's literally just sort of like drawing with a palette knife and putting it
That
down
is
where
so
you need.
cool.
They're they're very fun and a sort of easy entrance into pastels without getting your hands completely chalked up in the process because you have these
Yeah.
knives. I have sponges of different sizes and shapes and whatnot that I've had, and supposedly, and I've never done it, but supposedly you can wash them just like you would a makeup sponge or
Okay.
whatever. I don't know what those are called. Those like egg shaped things that you see.
Oh, the beauty blenders, right?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Beauty blenders. That's I knew that. Um, and so supposedly you can wash them and get a lot of the excess out of them. Most of the time, mine are so dirty and gray by the end of what I do with them that I just kind of toss them and get a new one for
Hmm.
the next project. But I used them in the previous book, and they helped sort of add tone that was really soft and not super brush heavy. Um, but yeah, if you've never used it, I bet you would dig them um, because of the sort of softness that you can get out of them. That's sort of why I got these out tonight. Was like I saw that Genevieve Gabeau book, and I was like, "Ooh, I want those soft tones again." Um, how often do you get to play? I mean, I know tonight you're sort of just doodling for fun and whatnot, but or I guess it's not totally for fun because it's your work on a website stuff. But how often do you get to sit down and just like make stuff for the thrill of it?
Honestly, really rarely. It's there was a time like back when had my old agency where I was just churning out project after project. I did not have a break for like 6 years. And then I got my new agent. I was still kind of like rushing through projects, and then in like 2020, 2021, I decided that, you know what, I need a vacation. And I've kind of made it like an annual habit that like once a year, usually in February, because it's seasonal depression and I just need that break. I just schedule it to make sure I have no work at all. And then that just becomes like my fun break time and I can work on whatever I want. But sadly, I did not get to do that this year, but I'm hoping that once this book project is done, I'll be able to get that free time. Just like right now, it's just not possible right now with like work and then baby on top of it. But I'm really looking forward to the day that I can just play again.
Do you this feel free to say no to answering this question because I don't want to
Mhm.
again if it's too personal or anything of the sort. But now that you have a little one, 8 months old is obviously like you know there's not super control over materials, like they're not sitting there drawing amazing realism or anything of the sort. But do you find that having a little one in house has changed your perception on sort of how you make? Or like I assume there's little projects that you do potentially, or like get them things like let them get their hands dirty, uh, playing around with just stuff. Does that change your perception on sort of like what you want to do in studio of any sort?
Oh, and it's uh I guess there are two different ways that it's affected my work. One is that like since we're not doing childcare right now, it's just me and him.
Yeah,
And so I get like smaller intervals of like how much time I can work because this boy does not like to sleep. So I just can't paint right now because by the time I get all of my paints out and my water and everything, then, I don't want to be painting just for like 20 minutes and then have to run
yeah,
out, right?
yep,
So I've been gravitating more towards my iPad right now. And if anything, I've been shifting less towards my art stuff and more towards like my other ways I can be creative. And for me, that is doing content. So making videos and making posts and making like educational stuff. So it's not ideal, but like at least it's a way that I can be creative right now that makes sense with the time that I have.
yeah.
Um,
You
but then the other way, oh, sorry.
you did one of those ads or something, or not an ad, but like a sponsored ad
Yeah,
with that
with
little like tripod phone
mhm.
thing, right?
Yes, I'm using it right now.
Yeah, is it what a Milo?
It's
Yeah.
Moft.
Moth. That's what I was like. It's an M something, um,
It's a weird
and it's
name.
okay. So I'm gonna. I guess that you can't really say anything bad about it, but I'm like, is that thing handy? Because it does look pretty handy. That little. Um,
Oh, I mean, I can talk smack about it. It's
oh,
fine.
okay.
But like I don't have anything bad to say about it. Maybe just like it could be like a little less expensive, but like uh this
Okay.
is what it is. It's obviously it's not going to be like sorry, I've got to put this back on because I was using it. It's not going to compare to like a full whatchamacallit, like a
Like a
full huge
yeah.
tripod because it is like a small little guy, but it does the job. Like it's portable. It's stuck to your phone so you can take it with you anywhere.
Sort of
So I'm loving it.
handy on the.
I'll still use like my other tripods, but this is good for specific purposes.
Well, that's. I mean, some of the stuff I've seen. I forget who the other illustrators I saw that used one, but they. It seemed really handy for sort of like if you're out and about and you need to do something like that, or you don't have a lot of space and whatnot. Now,
Hmm.
my setup, I'm just using a big old ring light, so it's not like
Oh,
I
nice.
need something that is that. But It does look like it's a handy little gadget for those that are trying to like document more and do the content sort of side that you're talking about. Um, with the books that you're working on, I know that obviously, or that you have in the hopper at this point, and mentioning that sort of idea of content, uh, and the the idea of making videos and things of the sort. Do you find that uh, you're more cognizant of sort of documentation now, like than what you were back in the day, or is that something that when you get into the studio and you go, I got to work on a book, like a serious book project, are you going to sort of go, I can't deal with social media at the moment. I have other things I got to do.
Oh man, it depends. So back when I had a Patreon, then I kind of felt like I had to really document everything for my patrons. But I'm really glad that I had that motivation because once I ended my Patreon, then I would just have times where like, like I don't have time for this. Like I just gotta like get into work mode. It's gonna be too much of a hassle to like record anything.
Yeah.
And so that's why I have nothing filmed for my latest book. And I'm kicking myself right now that like even if I filmed something, it would have come in handy or like it just would have been nice to see the process. So now moving forward, I'm going to be a little bit more mindful of recording my process, even if it's just like taking photos. In the past, I would do like, camera behind me and like recording the whole thing. I do feel like it's really uncomfortable drawing that way. So what I have started doing instead is things that are a little bit more sustainable. So that would be like if I'm going to be doing like a money shot of like, I'm doing like the little
Yeah.
details or something. Then I'll grab my phone and film just like a quick 2-second thing. Just collect, three times within a page. I'll just collect like a couple of quick shots. Um, and then just filming if I can, like a little talking head, just like, hi guys, I'm working on this today. These are my thoughts. Here's like a little, I'm going to start working on this right now. And then just cutting in and out like that. So I'm not really filming while I'm working. Just maybe like that first 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Because I find that, well, I don't know, maybe like people in the chat can give their thoughts. But I don't want to, it's fine if I'm not watching someone's entire progress, as long as I get to hear their thought process. Um, yeah, so that's why like I stopped filming the entire thing and just having like that little verbal word
I
vomit,
I like
which
that.
is easier to film as well.
I like that approach because I have the problem of, I don't, that's a bad way to phrase it. I was going to say, I have the problem of my wife. That's not what I intended to say, but my wife helps me manage social media stuff. And there's lots of times where she says, hey, can you film what you're working on? So we can have some content to put up at some point, whether it be, when the book is about to come out or things of the
Hmm.
sort. And I am notorious for two things. One, forgetting to do it,
Yeah.
or two, doing it and filming because I move my work around so much. Like, I don't know if anybody's
Hmm.
watching tonight, but this thing's been rotated and shifted around on my desk. And so if I film anything, it's either like off center or not even in
Right.
frame, or
It's
if it's a time lapse,
unusable.
spinning constantly and it's just nonsense. And so that idea, I like that idea of just like a 2 minute thing at the beginning that just says, hey, here's what I'm going to work on today. And you're sort of, you're very quickly solve that problem of recording something and then you can put it away and actually get to work in some
Hmm.
sense. So I like that. I'm going to have to borrow that or,
Yeah, try that
uh,
out.
yeah, I'm going to steal it. I'm going to take it from you, use it. Um, the, with, with that idea of social media, I mean, I know that you have a hefty, I will use that term, hefty following that loves your work. Do you feel ever any sort of sense of responsibility? This is going to be a weird way to say this. Any
Ooh.
responsibility to always be putting out content, or do you feel like it's easier to sort of look and say, okay, what do I feel like putting out, and you know, if today's not the day, who cares?
Yeah, so I guess like the pressure might come with, the fact that the algorithm does tend to punish people if they are not posting regularly. But like I have been better about like not feeling that pressure unless I have a project that's about to come out. So because my book is coming out in 2 weeks, I've been trying to like make sure I'm consistently posting about that. But
Yeah.
otherwise, I'll be like, whatever, it's okay. I cannot post. I just find a lot of fun in posting content, and so it's like my little break. It's my little treat. So I have a lot of fun with it. But I totally get the pressure of like wanting to create more and more. Especially with like all of these different platforms now, especially after Twitter went away, it just has not been the same. And I know Twitter still kind of exists, but it sucks, right?
Yeah.
And now we have like Blue Sky, we have uh Threads, people are on Substack, people are on TikTok, people are on Artful. I don't know, like there are like a million different platforms people are on, and everyone's just scattered. And you kind of like my stressor is like, where do I
Yeah.
go? Where is
Yeah.
everyone?
Where do you put the time and effort? I mean, I basically concentrated on Instagram still and Blue Sky
Mhm.
at this point, and there were apps like Kara. I don't know if you
Yeah, oh
were
yeah,
on the
Kara,
Kara
that's
train
right.
for a second, and now it's like no one's on there.
Oh
No one's
man,
participating. And
that had
there are
so
other ones like
much potential.
Mastodon, and I'm trying to remember all the different ones that were out there that were sort of in that same, like when Twitter was going down, people were
Yeah.
trying to jump and start their own thing. I'm not saying going down, but that there was a movement away from those. Let's put it that way. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
uh, I tried to jump on a bunch of different things, but it's sort of fallen back to like there's a couple I can only devote so much time on my day to
Yeah.
to doing that without pulling my hair out constantly
That's a
or work
lot.
all of that. Do you? One of the I hear from a lot of artists that they sort of don't like social media in general because of the like need to constantly be making and um, posting and things of the sort. But then obviously there's people that are very successful and that's been a very good thing for them and has brought them, you know, work and things of that sort.
Hmm.
Um, how do you, just thinking more holistically, is there a way that you sort of approach it that maybe takes some of that pressure off? Or maybe it does, I don't know. Maybe it's still completely taxing for you. But I think you're so good at social media at this point that I'm wondering, is there some method to the madness that makes it so you're not pulling your hair out on a regular basis?
Um, I think for me, like it's always been that like I enjoy it. So that is why it comes a little easier. And so I would say that like for sure, like if you don't like it, then don't do it. But you can find ways to make it a little enjoyable. And one of the things would be to like first of all, like not worry about like all of those hundreds of millions of platforms. Like they just find that thing that you do enjoy
Yeah,
doing. Whether if you like doing video content, then do video content. If you like just posting your stuff, post your stuff. If you like doing long text posts, do that. Um, and like if you don't want to share any of that, that's one thing. But for me, I've discovered that I really like doing videos, especially long form stuff, which is why like I really gravitated towards YouTube. And initially, when TikTok became a thing, I was like, oh, short form content. People have no attention spans. They're so stupid. And then I realized that, and then because like I kept trying to like make these huge, because like my YouTube videos are like an hour long, and I was like, how am I supposed to share my advice with people? Like it's 2 minutes is not enough. But then I realized that TikTok is more geared towards like a different form of media, of like sharing little snippets and like little, oh, this is what I did today and stuff like that. And so
yeah.
I found new enjoyment in that.
Plus, you're
Um,
on there dancing
with
too, right?
Oh yes, of
Yeah.
course. I know all the dance moves. So that's like one thing, like find if there's like something that you like to do do that. Another thing that I always like to stress to people, because people are really consumed by like, oh, I gotta have like the high follower count. But I really have to stress that like my larger following is more of an is a huge outlier rather than a kind of like a standard for what you need to have in this industry.
Yeah.
And just again, because this is like the type of content that I make. But when you think of your favorite, like if you are interested in children's book illustration or animation or whatever, when you think of like the people who are really succeeding, they maybe they have like 2,000
Mhm.
followers max, um, because they have successful jobs. They don't have time for this.
Yeah, or I mean,
Um,
I've said the same thing to students in that like some of the people that I absolutely love as illustrators have, 200 people because they just don't put the time into it, or they just that's not a priority
mhm.
in their life. And it's not to say that that numbers are the thing. Engagement is what I always heard is
Yes.
the thing, and engagement is very different than a number. Engagement is
Hmm.
interacting with people, and that's probably why you have the growth in numbers in general is not because of I mean obviously because of beautiful content. Let's not get that get that wrong, but that idea of like talking to people, or like I had someone just yesterday reach out to me and said, I'm a student that just graduated and I would really love some advice on just starting out, and do you mind taking a second? And it took me like a minute to respond to them
Hmm.
and just give them some tips of, here's what I would suggest, here's things I would look at, here's how agencies work, kind of thing. That um, taking that moment to just say, hey, I'm here to help and not just shun you because you don't know what you're doing, is
Hmm.
enough to like probably hook, line, and sinker that person to following over time. Not that that's the goal, but that's sort of um, I think that's a way to start to approach it, is to not worry about the number. Just think
Hmm.
about like how can you be helpful to people, or how can you reach out
Yeah.
and effectively network.
Yes. When people, if like people who are like stressed about the numbers, and they are in social media with the goal to find work, then another thing that I would stress is that like it's not the quantity, but I suppose the
Yeah.
quality. Where if you are looking to work with art directors and you're looking to work with editors and people and agents and things like that, then it doesn't matter if you have like 500,000 followers if not a single one of them is an art director, right? So
Yep.
even if you have like those 200 people, if you are connecting with potential, clients, then that's what matters more.
One of the things that I've mentioned to students in the past, and this will probably ring true as well for you, is the idea of um, there's lots, anybody can post stuff online, anybody can put stuff out there, and that doesn't mean that they're getting work. And so when people
Hmm.
someone on Instagram, or they look someone at someone on one of those sites and they go, oh, they have such a huge number or a huge following, like that's great, but if your job is to get work, go look and see where they're working,
Yep.
and you will find that those people that potentially have those numbers that you're following may not actually be getting work. They may be absolutely fabulous online, but that's different than landing a job at the end of the day.
100%.
So that can be a little challenging. I want to get to a couple of questions that people have on here that I wanted to sort of address, so they don't feel like we're ignoring them along the
Oh,
way.
yes.
Um, so some of these you've already answered. So let me just see if I can. Uh, uh, Someone, Floral Bikini says, I'm so thankful to you, and this is you, I think, and your advocacy for
Uh-huh.
transparency in the art business and community support.
Yay.
You're such a genuine and kind person. I love seeing your work in the world.
Oh,
So, very lovely statement there.
oh, thank
But
you.
they said, I'd love to know more about how you both have studied color and light, and lessons from that you apply to your rendering or work. Hope that question makes sense. So, we talked a little bit about color and your approach in color, but um, that idea of sort of how do you actually um, when you start to make your pieces, is there a method to the way that you sort of think about staging or some of the like more formal aspects of making art. You know, the not everybody uh, out there probably knows what I mean, but when I say formal, I mean things that are not about the content, but more about the like stuff you would learn in a 2D class, like shape and value and color and those kind of moments. Are there things that you do that sort of help um, get you started on a piece, or that are ways that make work easier for you long term when you're making? That was a long-winded question. I'm sorry.
Oh,
That was long.
no. I can try to answer that. So I guess like because of my character design background, I always think of appeal more than anything, and appeal just being like, is this pleasing to the eye? And this can come from a lot of different things. When you think about the fundamentals of art and things like that, like you like the rule of thirds, repetition, good contrast, all sorts of like that kind of stuff. And again, I'm just going by vibes. If something doesn't look correct or looks off, then I will just keep making adjustments until it starts to feel right. So what I'll usually start off with if I am working on a let's say like a picture book and I have a the manuscript and I have to like illustrate a scene. First thing I do is like ask a bunch of questions just internally. What am I trying to what am I trying to achieve with the scene? You know, is it going to be a quiet page? Is it something with action? What feelings am I trying to create from it? Is this going to be a spread or a spot? And just, you know, a lot of questions like that just to kind of get me started. And then from there, it's just a lot of sketching and trial and error. I'll always go with like my gut of, you know, let's say if right now, um, let's say I am illustrating a girl sitting at her desk. I mean, the most obvious would be up front, you know, she's sitting, she's working at her desk, you know,
Yeah.
like so. Um, But then from there, I'm like, okay, you know, this could serve itself in like some purposes, but it's a little boring. Let's see, how can we push this further? You know, again, what am I trying to convey through this illustration? Is this an infographic because we're looking straight on
Yeah.
ahead? No, we want to, maybe we want to see a little bit of her world. You know, maybe we want to see that she is, you know, daydreaming and she's like really into the work. And just, you know, we want to see a bit more of her work. So
Some dynamic.
then we decide that the focus is going to be the art instead of the girl. So then we would change the angle. So it's more so the table instead of just head on, right? And so she's looking here
Yeah,
at
that idea of,
the artwork.
yeah, how to make it something that has. I always like the go to the idea of like ant's eye view and bird's eye view, and then like, you
Hmm.
know, those are the extremes of how you can set up that scene and almost edge back towards. Now I don't do, admittedly, I don't do that in my work all the time. Like most of the time I do these weird sort of flat pieces, but that idea of when I'm teaching
Hmm.
students this, that idea of like, okay, well, you don't always have to do um, sort of the straight on or centered, and you can start to mess with things. And it's almost better in my mind to step so far away from what you actually think you're supposed to do
Yep.
and come back to safety than to try to creep away from it, because more than likely you're going to hesitate and not do something that's wild and different. Um, I
Yeah, it's pretty rare that like your first idea is going to be
yeah,
the winning one.
yeah. It's there's a design assignment that we had years ago that um, we've done this with illustration students at the school I teach at, but um, the idea of it's for making icons for something like a phone, sort of an app icon, and the idea is that you say you got to draw 100 tree icons, and
Ooh.
the first ones are like, it's going to be a triangle with a little trunk underneath it, and we'll call it a day. and then eventually you're starting to go like, okay, I can't do a triangle anymore. It's a circle, and it's still got that line that represents the trunk. And then eventually, by the time you get down to like 50 or 100, you're going like, okay, it's this weird squiggle that doesn't look anything like a tree, but it's representing a tree. And there's, there is no trunk anymore. It's floating in the sky. And, you start to get to this point where stuff gets so wild, and maybe it's too wild, but you force that hand a little bit to make something that's, again, unexpected or
Hmm.
challenging to your perception of what you should be doing. Um, that, did you take design courses, or because one of the things that I like to look at is I feel like illustrators fall into one of two camps, or I shouldn't say camps. There are two sort of ends of a rainbow, and one of them is sort of the illustration designer, and one of them is the illustration painter. And the designer is like shape based and color based and things of the sort, and the painter is more about light and texture and things of that sort. And I'm wondering, like, I look at your work and you have such a clear vision for shape that I'm
Oh,
like,
interesting.
if you had to put yourself in that spectrum of sort of that designer on one end, painter on the other side, do you feel like you lean one way or the other in that instance?
Oh, okay.
Tough question.
Can you explain the
That's a
difference again?
what the difference?
What,
Well,
can you explain the difference?
the
Yeah.
way that I tend to look at it is the idea that the painter would be more textural and brushstroke and worry about light and how light affects a piece heavily. And then the designer, I always put in the ballpark of someone who's really concerned about shape and like composition and
Mm.
like color blocking. And so like if I look at my work, I kind of see myself in the middle. Like I really love texture, but I'm also not painting light. I'm painting texture as shape. And so I sort of feel like I don't know as if I lean one way or the other, but I definitely am a shape person. And so I don't know what the answer is in my case, but I'm wondering, like, do you sort of, when you look at your work, is there a way that you tend to sort of go, oh, this is the kind of work that I really gravitate towards and
I
thoroughly
think
enjoy?
that I would be a shape person
Shape.
then. And I wonder, do you find that like there if someone is a digital artist versus a analog artist, do you find that like maybe that usually digital artist tends to be that design
No,
person because
no.
like you're dealing a little less with texture or no?
No, I think at this point, I mean, I think back in the day that was probably true. Like people who use Illustrator are probably like, it's hard to get a painterly texture out of Illustrator. But
Hmm.
I think that at this point, so many digital applications like Procreate and stuff are so good at creating texture and creating or synthesizing that sort of traditional aesthetic that I think it's I don't think there's really a difference at this point
Hmm.
in sort of, or I don't think there's a clear divider that says, hey, this is a digital piece, this is a tech or a traditional. I mean, even as stated, and you probably run into this as well. I just handed in some sketches for or a little sample for a book project that they're trying to pitch, and they came to me and said, hey, can you give us the layered files with the character in the front? And I had to stop and be like, I don't actually have layered files. Like, and I ended up going back into Photoshop and like cutting the piece out and mocking it up so it would be layered, but that is not the
That's
way
funny.
that my work was made. And so there was this challenge of, or this perception that they had that all work is digital. Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
and that's not necessarily true, and vice versa. There are people who I look at and I go, oh, that's a beautiful watercolor piece. And I go look at the front of the book and it says, this was done with Photoshop. And I'm like, what? That blew my mind. Um, and so do you think there's a like a clear indicator at this point? Like, can you tell what's digital versus traditional? Or do you think that line is blurred?
If I definitely feel like the line is blurred for sure. I think there are so many incredibly talented illustrators who are able to really emulate the look of traditional painting. It's yeah, it's definitely come a long way.
I like even with Lost Stick, there's some pages in there where I was, it's so crisp and clean in sections. I was like, oh, this is like totally digital. And then I look and the next page, I'm like, oh, there's a drop shadow because of some little collaged element. And I'm like, oh, no, it's not. And then the next page, I'm like, oh, it's so crisp and clean. I, it's not necessarily that like there's a huge difference between the pages, but as someone who teaches illustration, I go back and forth looking at material quite often, or looking at sort of the approach or the way that someone works. And so like there's certain pages where I'm like, oh, on first pass I would go, oh, this is digital, and then second pass I'm like, nope, I see a little thing, and that tells me it's not. I will say there's a page in here that I think is amazing, and I'm going to tell you exactly. Well, there's a lot of pages that are amazing in Lost Stick, but this travel sequence, I don't know if you can,
Cute.
if you see the one here where it's
Hmm.
a dog is going through Venice and then Egypt, or Middle East, I think maybe, and then to
Hmm.
Carnival, and then to a snow uh, uh, place. I don't know what
Hmm.
you call it. But this page is so good, and the thing that I absolutely love, and this is right in that ballpark for me of like the thing I would do, is that roller coaster that's happening, or the car that's going down in the sort of carnival thing,
Hmm.
where the wheels are like out of perspective and off to the
Hmm.
side, is so good. Like
Oh, thank you.
that's the thing. Like those are the nuances wherein, as a illustrator myself, as someone who likes to mess with perspective and play with these things, when I saw that, I'm like, that is so smart. And then to see the drop shadow and how you cut the paper so that white that runs through the page is actually cut out of the piece, I was like, oh, you are so smart.
Oh,
And
let me actually get that original for you.
you
Let
have,
me find it.
ooh boy, okay. this,
Whee!
this is why,
All of my
yeah,
original art is just dumped into here. Let's
this is
find
the
it.
whole reason for having people on, is so I can get them to show me the real
Is
thing.
it in here? Actually, you know what? That one is so huge it wouldn't fit into here. I have it in my closet. One second. Let me find that. Yeah, I'll be back in a quick second. It's right here. Um,
I've not kept up with the questions that are popping up here too, so I'm going back and looking.
okay. So this is the uh, original painting for Lost Stick. I ended up making it way bigger than it actually is in the final book.
How
It
long do you
is,
think, like proportionately, how long do you think that thing is?
um, well, I have no idea. I'm gonna put my phone to scale just over there. So it's pretty big.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I can see the iPad and the phone there. Yeah. So we're talking, that's probably like 30 inches, maybe. Well,
Maybe.
maybe somewhere there. The reason I ask is it's so long, and I have the problem of like, because I'm working traditionally, that sometimes I'm making something that is way too long, uh, as a piece, and I have to fight it on my desk. And then you're right with like the storage. I have some pieces that like barely fit into storage later down the line and things of the sort. And so um, that is lovely to see, uh, the whole thing. And how did you scan it?
Um, I actually photographed this book.
You
Um,
photographed
just
the book?
'cause, yeah, I this
Okay.
was my first traditionally illustrated book and my first collage project, and I found that when I scanned things, I was losing a lot of that lovely collage shadow where like that I worked so hard to achieve. I didn't want
Yeah.
it to look like it was flat, right? So I found that like if I photographed it, I could retain that like lovely shadow, and so that's what I did.
Okay. So now wait, did you photograph or did someone else photograph?
Oh my God. So I initially hired a photographer, but they
Uh-oh.
did not do a great job. And so, yeah, I paid a lot of money and it was very last minute. And so it did the job-ish. But then for the cover, which I painted after the book was complete, I decided to photograph that myself, and I did a decent job at it. And so for my book that I did after this, Sorry Sisters, that was another collage project that I photographed entirely by myself.
Okay. It's one of those things like I don't feel confident enough in my photography skills to do a good job with that. Do you have like a DSLR?
Yeah, yeah, I have a DSLR. I don't know how to use it. I'm sure I could have gotten a much better um, quality capture. I didn't use any fancy lighting equipment. I just used the power of the sun.
Wow. Okay. I mean, like a cloudy day.
Oh yeah. So especially with Lost Stick, that cover was painted in the middle of and actually Sorry Sisters too. They were both painted in Canadian winter. And so with Sorry Sisters, I was waiting every single day for a sunny day, and I was getting close to like the deadline day. I was really getting stressed out. And so we thankfully, in the middle of like weeks and weeks of gray, we had a day of sun, and I was like, I don't care if I have anything else going on today. I have to get this done. And I just got it done that day.
I like the fact that you added Canadian winter, as in like that is a more powerful winter than than what the average person knows.
Yes.
It's like intense. Um, with okay, so I want to go back a little bit to sort of the history side of things because you're coming from uh, a variety of different moves throughout your life as an artist and um, experiences of living in different countries and school in a different country and now you've ended up in the old USA and I'm wondering like how much influence do you think that put into your work like obviously like you have a subject matter like Sorry Sisters and like we know that the subject matter is there. But there was a couple of pieces that I've seen where I look and like, oh, it reminds me of Persian miniatures. And
Oh
there
yes.
are pieces where I look and I go like, oh, some of the color palette or some of the nuances sort of end up in the work, whether like on a formal level, not necessarily on a concept or narrative level. And I'm wondering how much of that sort of shows up or how cognizant are you of that sort of um, what do I want to say, like upbringing and the experiences that you've had in life on how it sort of affects
Um,
work now.
yeah, I think that's a good question. I think that definitely like my art style influences everything has been shaped by the different places that I've lived in. For example, in the schooling that I did in Switzerland, a lot of the animation illustration influences were, like the French style, which has a very different look to the American style. So like some of that is in there. Um, in recent years, I've become really interested in cultural art, specifically, as you said, miniature illustration. So I used that very specifically for my Salt Princess book, which is based on folks' tales. So I felt like that would be a good fit for the book. But some parts of it have still remained in my work. Like I still really love like decorative painting and elements. So even though like my style, as you can see here, that's not really miniature painting. I still like doing little details and stuff like that. So that'll still come up. Um, yeah, I don't know. Like definitely, I feel like all of these little influences come up one way or another, and like it's always changing. Um,
Yeah,
maybe
not,
a year from now, it's gonna look completely different too.
yeah, potentially not forcing your hand, but it just naturally sort of shows up because of influence or time or things of that sort.
Hmm.
I mean, I'm not necessarily or here I'll put it this way. I am very bland and wonder bred as a person. There's not a huge cultural background that shows up in this. in this gene pool, and yet there are things that like influenced my artwork over time that have started to sort of populate, and some of it is like the stuff that I like to look at art wise, but some of it is, it's gonna sound weird, but I think that age and my level of interest in finite details has diminished
Mhm.
times. So like my skill with a tiny brush has decreased. And so like now I start to like, oh, I don't care as much about the tiny detail. I'm much more interested in a chunky line or things that are
Ooh.
maybe not as crystal clear as they once were. And so like it's an age thing versus a cultural thing, but I think that it's sort of like it pops up whether I want it to or not because of uh, the experience or the situation that I'm in. Um, do you find? I realize I haven't shown anybody what I'm actually doing on this, so I don't know if this makes any sense. Let me share the little sketch that I drew. So for anybody uh, it wasn't here for the beginning, this is a folk tale about what was the name that I said?
Um,
Alfred Bulltop Stormalong.
what a
And
name.
yeah, apparently there was a point where I think he was about to die or something like that, and he was off the coast of Florida, and there was a hurricane that was going on, and so he picked up all the tiny boats out of the ocean and put them on his ship to save them. And so he was on a clipper, which I think is one that has a bunch of sails. And so I'm making him picking up all the boats out of the sea and putting them on his ship, and that's what we're making. So, but like the pants originally I would have been like, I got to make these lines perfect, but now I'm like, as an old person, uh, or older person, I'm like, I don't really care anymore about getting out the finest brush that I have, and like I'm okay with a little heathery texture here and there that pops up. Um, this is called Old Guy Corner. This moment that we're sharing here. Okay, so I'm going to give you an opportunity because uh, you have a little one, and I imagine there's some
Yeah.
aches and pains along with the stress. What are we seeing right now as an illustrator? Tell us your woes.
My woes, my back hurts. Um, my back has always hurt. That's why it's very important to do strength training as an artist because you are sitting down all day.
Yep.
You're hunched over.
Do you have like an ergonomic
Um,
chair and stuff?
I have I have a branch chair. I really like that brand. It's a nice blue color. It's called
Oh,
Branch.
okay. I was gonna like branch. I was like, are you sitting on a twig? What's you said branch?
It's very old school for sure.
Yeah. Okay. You're really roughing it there. Have you at this point, like with some of the making and some of the bigger movements, like making that large piece that was for Lost Stick? Did you find that there are things that like your this? Well, that's gonna sound really depressing to ask this. I was gonna say, have you found that you're like that there are challenges now making artwork that you didn't have when you were younger?
Um, yeah, for sure. I don't know how I had the stamina that I did back then. Um, to especially like to make a lot. I get tired very quickly. Where like I just don't want to keep drawing. That's like one thing. I'm a sleepy girl. Like
Okay.
after a certain point, I'm like, I'm done. I don't want to draw. Um, especially like when in my first 2 years straight out of school, I would have an hour and a half commute to downtown Toronto where I had my animation job, commute back 1.5 hour, and then I'd be working on picture books up until like midnight. And
Ugh.
I'd be fine the next
Yeah.
day. I cannot imagine doing that now.
What's bedtime right now?
Ugh, bedtime, well, it depends. It's usually 10. It's usually 10. Some days it's 8. Some days it's 12. But it's wake up is always at 6 o'clock when baby wakes up. So obviously if I sleep in earlier, I get to sleep more. But when he's asleep, that's when I can do things like what I'm doing right now. So it's always a toss up.
That's I think the reason why I work at night is one because of the teaching, but two because at a time when my like it's a holdover potentially from when my kid was young, and I don't mean to blame him and say he's the worst, but he's the worst. Um, yeah, but that same idea of like it's you're dealing with a youngin all day, and then you finally get a chance to like have a moment of silence, and you're like, oh, this is the time I got to spend or this is my chance to essentially make the work that I need to work on that I haven't had a chance to do all day. Um,
hmm
do you find one of the questions I always love is, you know, I have an older son at this point. He's 12, and so he's moved past the
Aw.
phase, but he still reads picture books because we have him in the house all the time.
Ooh,
But with having a uh, you said 8 month, is that right?
8 months,
Yeah.
that's right.
Wait, how many weeks is that? Are
Oh,
we still in phase?
don't ask me.
Okay, okay, we moved past that phase where it's like you're stop counting weeks and you get into months.
Yeah.
But are you like has your perception or the way that you think about your work or children's books in general has that changed at all now that you have your own little one to read
Yes.
to and to have interact with books? And obviously, like they're not reading middle grade novels or anything of the sort, but
Mhm.
um, how has that changed, or what has your perception become now that you've had that opportunity?
Sure. And I'm going to unfortunately answer this one quickly because I gotta go.
Okay.
The way that it's changed is well, he's reading board books right now, and I've had worked on a couple of board books in the past and considered like writing one as well. And now, like when I read books to him, I am drawn to like the ones that are super minimal, the ones that are a very certain way. Because like when I look at the books that I've had a chance to work on, or like ones that I've been interested in before, I'm like, wait, I don't think he would enjoy reading those right now. Like that's I'm a little bit more attuned into like what he would actually enjoy.
Yeah,
So that is one cool way. And I'm sure that like as he gets older and gets interested in picture books, he'll be like a little test subject, right?
my yeah, yeah
And I'll be able to
my
understand him.
range of what I want to work on is changing a little bit because of his growth and like what's
That's
actually
awesome.
so expect that to come. Well, yeah, I don't want to keep you. I know that you are limited in time and have lots of things to take care of there, potentially a little one, uh, or a big one who's taking care of a little one. Who knows? Um, but I do want to say thank you for joining us tonight. And I know there's lots of people watching who tuned in to chat with you, and we didn't get to a ton of questions. But I know that you are also a very giving person, and if and I will too. I will stay on and try to answer as many questions as I can. And if there's questions that they have for you, I might try to relay some of those questions after the fact. But um, you go have a lovely evening and get to sleep early because you have lots of work to do going forward. I like how we're getting a tour as we're wrapping up here. Uh,
Yeah.
but thank you again for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for
Yeah.
having me. I can't wait to see your finished piece.
Yeah, same thing. Tag me when you're done. I want to see.
Okay,
I want to see those finishes. All right. Have a lovely evening.
bye.
Bye. All right, folks. So, um, hold on a second. I don't want you to see the top of my curtain. There's a ceiling right there. It's attached to the ceiling. Okay, so here's what's going to happen. I have a lot of work to do on this. Again, I got to paint multiple ships. I got to put the head in. I got to draw a little whirlwind happening in the background. I'm going to switch down to a downshoot here, back to what I was working on. And I'm going to I'm going to get rid of the ask us anything, and I'm going to switch it to ask me anything. And I'm happy to answer anything that would pertain to my work or to questions in general. I don't want to necessarily answer for Anoosha, but I do want to make sure that um, I answer questions for those that have questions. And so you can put that in the comments, and I will continue to work and answer where I can. And I'm going to go back and let me see if I can find. Well, I'll do it on my iPad. That's easier. So let me switch back down to my downshoot. Again, there's the sketch for anybody that's tuning in. This is the sketch I'm working on of Alfred Bulltop Stormalong. This is from Wikipedia, but I've read some of the originals. But the idea of this one, while Stormalong was on his Caribbean adventures, he passed by Florida, seeing that there were a tremendous hurricane that tore through his ship. Ships sailing nearby were being tossed around by heavy waves. Stormalong went overboard and piled as many boats as he could onto his ship. The storm was still running. When the storm finally wound down, the sailors were dropped back off at Florida. After that, he went back on board, unfurling the sails of his ship, seeing if they could be repaired. A great wind, the last blow of the hurricane, hit the sails, lifting Stormalong and his ship into the sky. And so, I just realized, yeah, I'm staying on that. But that's the basic gist of this. He's a cool character if you get a chance to read any of the like tall tales that go along with it. At one point, I was looking at doing a book series or trying to write a book series about folk tales and tall tales that are out there in Americana sort of stuff. And so I am trying to play around with that. The last couple of weeks, I did stuff that was, I can't think of the term, for nursery rhymes. And so now I'm trying to like venture out into a little bit of a different territory, into folktales a little bit. My wife also posted, I have a question. Have you ever tried smoked Czech cereal? I will add this in before I get to some of the questions. That tonight I almost burnt our house down because we had some stuff sitting on the stovetop, some cereal boxes, and in the process I accidentally turned on the burner, trying to turn on a different burner. I hit the wrong one, and all of a sudden we started smelling burnt paper, I guess, and it was coming from the stovetop, and I did not notice it. I did not notice it. My wife noticed it before I did, and immediately went and grabbed stuff that was starting to charbroil on that burner, and we had to open up the windows and whatnot. But we didn't start a fire, but there was smoke. Well, I guess that's basically the same thing. So we did start a fire. I started a fire, and so she's having some Czech cereal right now that must have a little bit of a smoky leftover. And that's what she's asking that question. Okay, let me go back up to some of these questions and see if I can answer as we go along. So illustrated, yes, I can add. I will do that one first, and I'll make my way back up. So talking about sort of how work is changing as my son grows and whatnot. I think some of this is, it's obviously I'm not making work that is his age. A 12-year-old is not going to be reading picture books, nor are they going to be reading like chapter books or early readers. But I think that as time has gone on, because I've read stories that are longer form to him, like reading something like why am I drawing a blank on the name? Jackson Lightning Thief. Some of the stories like that and whatnot, that all of a sudden I'm starting to look. Not Peter Jackson. Oh, wow, I'm really struggling on that. What is that? Percy Jackson. It started with a P. I was close. Anyway, thank you, Lauren. My wife yelled it down to me. But reading something like that, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I love the prose, or I love the sort of the longer form. And then you look at a picture book and it's like, okay, well, why am I limiting myself to a small manuscript or a word count? And maybe I could look at the next level up and find opportunity there. And so then I started writing books that I thought might lean a little towards that, or are going to allow for a little bit more flexibility in word length, not word, wording rather, types of words, but also in the length of the manuscript and whatnot. And so I'm looking at that as an opportunity and starting to play around with I have a story that I wrote that I sent off to my agent, and I'm waiting to hear back if there's any interest, or if it's like me being silly with it. Now, I think there's a lot of merit in it, but there's also probably a lot of challenges because I'm not used to writing that long of a form, and so I'll see what she says. But that is like a clear indication. As far as visual, I don't know if there's something that I'm looking at that's more like an older age range, but I think that I have I have the challenge of like there's sometimes where I really want to draw something cutesy, and then times where I want to draw something that's maybe a little more artsy fartsy, and that becomes a challenge too. Okay, let me go back up and see if I can answer some of these other questions that were up further, because I know there were a couple of them that I think I could answer as we go along. Let's see. Hold on a second. I'm trying to get back up there to where this. Um, Gia Lee, I don't know if you're watching or if you've left or anything of the sort, but I'm going to answer this question for you. The question is, any advice for graduating illustrators to get involved in the children's book industry? So fabulous question. A challenging question too, because it's not always the easiest thing to answer, because there are so many different ways to get involved in the kidlit world, that I wish I could say like, this is the, do A, B, and C and you're done. And clearly that's not the way that this operates. You have to find your own path, let's put it that way, to make that work. However, I will say there are ways to sort of start that journey, or to take that sort of leap. And the way that I would suggest for most people is to rely on some of the resources that are out there that are intended specifically for kidlit. And so things like SCBWI is a great resource for those that are trying to start out. For those that don't know, that is the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators. It is a society that you can join. You can pay to have access to. You can also go to some of the events and you just pay a higher price in general. But the gist of it is a group of folks that get together through conferences and workshops and things of that nature, who are all interested in making work for the kidlit world. And so the tendency in that is to make conferences and things of that sort. Now, I say kidlit, and I should be mindful that kidlit does not just mean picture books. Kidlit means anything that is basically young adult and younger. So imagine that sort of age range and application. And so there's this the society you can join. And what's really great about it is they have those conferences and ways for people to network and find each other and talk and start to explore what is what the industry is looking for, and how you can sort of grow as a artist in this field. And so it does cost money to join, but I think it's really good. It gives you access to some art directors and agents and things of the sort that I think would be beneficial. The other thing I would say is, even if you don't join that, getting out to some of those conferences or getting into those environments where you have that opportunity to meet those folks and to explore the those kind of relationships. And sorry, I'm looking for a certain swatch of paint that I thought I had up there. Let's see, that one's probably better. That is better. Would be beneficial. Outside of that, you can. There are some conferences and things that are not related to that in particular that are wonderful, and some events that are outside of that. I would say the big thing is starting to just network in general and finding your group of people, your pals, that you can actually have conversations about the work that you're making on a regular basis, a quick group basically. And they don't all have to be in that industry, but it's great if one of those folks is in the industry, because it means that you can start to have conversations with someone who's already sort of been there at least a little bit as you start. And so that group doesn't have to be huge, but I do think that having someone who's, you know, had a book out, or a person who is, you know, getting a book deal is wonderful, because you get to see their journey and you can learn from that. But also it's good to have people who are on the other end of the spectrum that potentially have not had that opportunity, and you are potentially their expert that they rely on in order to figure stuff out. Wow, this head is, I guess he's that much taller than what he is in the other one, so I'm trying to figure out sort of what scale of head, how big do I want this head to be? I just don't, it's, I think, a little too big on the top of the head. But I still need to get the hat in there, and then I need to figure out how to get some like cloud and whatnot. So maybe I'll stay with this sort of scale. Let's see. There is the next question. Whoa, where was it? Oh no, that wasn't a question. That was a comment. Let me see. Hold on one second. Hold on one second. I'm trying to get down to where we are question-wise. It's just taking a while. I have to scroll down a ways. There's a lot of questions and a lot of comments that I missed. Smoky flavored, check. So we're getting back to the where people are. Lots of people saying Percy Jackson because I was an idiot. I'm looking to get an agent, but I worry about the portfolio not being tailored enough because I'm interested in young adult, middle grade covers, but also picture books. Any suggestions? Okay, good question. Now, I'm someone who doesn't have necessarily the broadest when it comes to, I tend to just lean towards picture books in my portfolio itself. But I think one of the things that I would look at is not necessarily, or the way that I would stress this to a student is wrapping your head around the question differently. And what I mean by that is it's very easy to say, hey, I have work that is middle grade, and I have stuff that's young adult, and I have stuff that's a picture book. And that's one way to look at the work. I think the other thing that you could consider is, are there messages or let me back this up. Let me say this a different way. There are folks who look at their work and they immediately go, this content is this style that I have. And that word is tricky, admittedly. But the style that I have is leans young on this one and maybe older on this other, or the style is dark and the style is light, and you have two different things going on. And then it becomes this question of like, how do you put them together? How do you make them feel cohesive? And the way that I tend to tell people to look at that is, style is not the best word because it implies a certain look, and it's better to say voice. And by voice, you're implying what it says, which is probably a better way to look at it. And so, you know, your voice is going to incorporate style, but it's not going to be solely spent around that idea of only what it looks like. And all of a sudden you can start to get into, oh, well, maybe it's about what it says and why you would have this this one image paired with this other that may be totally like a different aesthetic, but you look at it and they're both about the same subject, or they're both about the same sort of conceptual play. Or I'm trying to think of all the variables that could come into this while looking for the right color to play with here. So I'm trying to find the best color for those other boats, and maybe I don't have the color done yet, so maybe I need to make those. And so if you start to wrap your head around it in a different way and say, I don't want to worry about the visual aesthetic, but worry about what it's saying, then all of a sudden that becomes easier. So if I look at that same question, I say, you're worried about having something that is young adult, middle grade, and picture book. Is let's change the conversation away from the age that it is directed towards and change it to the kind of story that you want to tell. And my guess is that between those three, there is something that's tying them together. So if you're a fantasy person and they all lean towards fantasy, and you like to draw dragons and you like to draw wizards and things of that sort, well, that can be applied to young, old, and middle, I guess. If you're someone who likes to do really cute animals that shows up in things, there's no reason why you couldn't do something that's for picture book and something that's for young adult, and maybe you tailor the style a little differently um, to match that age range, but the content or the core of the piece is relatively similar. So like I look at work that I'm doing, like even the piece I'm trying to work on tonight is not necessarily the same style as the rest of my work. Like all of a sudden I have this long-legged person and they're going to be an older person. It's not a little kid. In most picture books, you aim towards like a character that's a little kid. And so like, does this fit in that same ballpark? Not necessarily, but I'm using some of the same textures. I'm using some of the same color palette or playing with color in the same way. And I'm thinking about the sort of, you know, there's one way to sell this story where like, as a folktale, this Stormalong is rough and tumble and has seen lots of craziness in his life. And, you know, I could express it that way, but I could also just say, oh, you know what? It's also kind of young at heart. And so I don't need to show death and destruction. Or if I do, it can be like the equivalent of this, his ship fell apart. What I might do is draw some cracks in the ship to show that it's starting to fall apart, but not actually show him in deep despair trying to survive. And so those kind of like twists are going to help connect it to the rest of my work, even if the style or what I see is maybe slightly different is not exactly the same. Oh, I can't use yellow there because of that. All right, so I'm going to make some other swatches. That's what this boils down to. I have to. I don't know if that helped or not, but that's sort of my take on it. Let's put it that way. Hold on one second. I gotta grab this piece of paper over here to say. I'm trying to get this peach color. See if I can introduce that. I hope that helped. Or illustrating for other authors, or wait, I might fall asleep before you get to this, but what is more rewarding, illustrating for other authors or illustrating for your own book? I will try to answer that from my point of view. I don't know what Anoosha would say, but for me, illustrating for other people can be, well, the industry itself kind of disconnects a little bit of the illustrator from the author. And there's good reason to do that. I will admit there's good reason to sort of separate or not have them always talking to each other, just so there isn't any bickering or any challenges to like, I don't like the way that you changed that or whatnot, that there's a middleman or I shouldn't say man, middle person who can help navigate those challenges, those thoughts in a way that is constructive for other people to get a sense of the core of the statement. You know, if an author comes to me and says, hey, I don't like the way you did that, yeah, I'm going to be upset. But if an art director comes to me and says the same thing, I'm going to go, oh, they probably have some vision for this, and I'm just not understanding it. And then what was I saying? So there is that challenge of like how to make work for someone where like you may not have the same vision. But I will also add in that working for yourself can also be really challenging because you put so much into it, and then if it doesn't live up to your liking, then all of a sudden you've let yourself down, or you know you might have so much heart in what you're doing, and then if you don't quite achieve, you've basically ruined your baby of some sort. There's also the challenge of if it's your own book or your own writing, that you are actually having to be both the author and the illustrator at the same time, not just in a like time constraint issue, but also in a way wherein if the art director or the editor wants to change it, you might have to meet them in the middle in a way, even though you might be like wanting something wildly different. It is a collaborative project, And if it's someone else working on it or someone else writing it, sometimes you can sort of disconnect a little bit easier and go, oh, well, this isn't my baby 100%. And so I'm not as offended or challenged by the idea of changing or altering this project. And so, there's the bad side. The good side in illustrating someone else's work is it's already written for you. You don't have to do as much. The downside to it is it's someone else's word, and so there's like this ownership question that I've always had of like, whose book is this? Even though I'm just as important in the process, so much of the visual shows up. There's still this like, well, someone else wrote it, and so it's hard to go out there and sell it, saying like, I was just as important as the writing. But then on the other side, the reward on the writing it yourself, yeah, you have to write it, and that's a huge struggle to write and write well. But then at the end of the day, you did both, and potentially you have more oversight on, or can transition. So if you like working on the visual, and then all of a sudden you like some visual idea, and it might change the story, it's a little bit easier because you are both creators. Let's put it that way. I'm trying to create some darker colors to match the shoes on that guy. Okay, let me go back down and let's see what else we got. Yes, the SCBW, I see a lot of people saying there's different chapters. There are chapters both all over the US, but also all over the world. And it's a matter of like how local they are. Some of them are a little bit further away, but there are certain ones that it's worth going to if they're bigger conferences. So like the New York one in the US, the New York one and the LA one tend to be a little bit bigger. There are certain ones that are maybe a little bit more starter friendly or craft friendly versus like marketing friendly. And what I mean by that is like the one that's in New England here. Although this year I don't know what it's going to be like because they've been online for so long that they're going to have one that's in person in a new location, which is different too, which will be interesting to see how it sort of operates. But one of the things that they, I think, are very good at is the craft side. So there's lots of workshops about how to make work just as much as there is like, hey, let's go get you in front of an art director or a publisher or things of the sort. New York, obviously, because of the publishing industry it's there, that one leans heavier on that side of sort of the networking side. And so it really depends on where you're going and what you're going for. But in general, I think they are all good. I think once you get up to a certain level or you have that network built up, maybe it's not as important for the craft side. But when I go now, the stuff that I go for is not what I was originally going for. As an illustrator, I would go to those events, and I was going because I wanted to learn about different, illustration practices, not necessarily like aesthetic, like how do I make my work sell visually, but I was going for like, okay, if I'm working on a project and there's a challenge with deadlines or those kinds of things. And now when I go, it's more, or when I've been recently, I did not go this last year, but when I go recently, the idea is more focused on, okay, what am I missing as a skill? And I don't think I'm a very good writer, so I'm going to go and take more writing sessions. So last time I went to basically writing sessions and not illustration sessions. And that was probably more helpful for me at the time. That being said, there's other conferences and things that are out there. I want to get out to, and I didn't do it this year because of being overseas, but I really would like to get out to Icon, which is a whole nother illustration conference that is directed at illustration in general, not necessarily kidlit, but just because of the variety of people that would show up to that and just a new network to grow essentially would be good. And that one moves around. And this last summer it was in Minneapolis. And I don't know, it may be stated at this point, I should double check, but it may be or it's not maybe, it will be in a different city. It moves every 2 years. It only happens every other year, and it's always in a new location. And so I don't know where it's going to be in 2026. if I do the math, but I will probably, if I have the ability to, I will try to get out to that one. And you know, I'm sure, I know there's people that I know in the industry that have gone to those that are kidlit, and there's events and things of that sort for them, but it's not directed at kidlit particularly. There we go. I've got some things that I can use for votes now. Matt Johns says, first time viewer here. Hello from Scotland. I'm generally charmed by your work, Mark. Really resonate with your playful approach to creating. Very interested to know how you entered into Kidlit. Okay, so Matt Johns, I'm going to tell a story. Some people have heard this before, so those who have heard it, feel free to tune out. You don't need to listen to me. No one really needs to listen to me, but I will tell this story, and then you can take from it what you will. So I went to school. I'll give you the history. This is probably good for everybody too, in some sense. When I went to college, my goal as a young whippersnapper was not to go into Kidlit. That was not my goal of any sort. I didn't have any interest. I didn't know anything about it. My goal was to get into comics at the time. I was big into comics when I graduated high school. I thought that was the direction for me. I still think comics are fun, but that's why I went to college. Now, this will be true for anybody that has. This is just a normal old piece of kids' construction paper. This stuff is copy paper, like cards, not cardstock, but it's just copy paper that's neons. And then most of this, the other stuff that's thin is tracing paper. So when I was in school, every semester, basically, I got interested in a new subject matter. And, you know, I had a different teacher, or I had a different content, a different class that got me excited about various things. So when I was a freshman, it was like sci-fi fantasy. That was what I wanted to get into, comics, basically, but in that world of sci-fi fantasy. And so I was drawing big, muscly dudes, and, you know, proportions were wrong, not because I didn't know how to draw them, but because you just had to put muscles on everybody. And then sophomore year, I took a class, and I don't remember whose class it was, but I got introduced to Jordan Issip, who was an illustrator. At the time was doing a lot of sort of editorial work, and I really loved his approach to design and sort of like collage stuff, which is funny. He basically does painted collage, which is what I'm doing now. And I I see real quick, Bridget Berringer. The color that I painted on top of is actually salmon to put this color down, but some of the colors that I have over here are sort of neon bright, like this yellow is pretty intense yellow. Anyways, sophomore year, I got into that sort of editorial thing. And then junior year, I got into kids' books. And so, you know, again, it was a class that I took, and I was like, oh, that's pretty good. I like that. And then senior year, by the time I was in my last semester, I took a designing for illustrators class. It was basically a graphic design class, but it was in the illustration program. And so there was a lot more like image making involved in it. And I really enjoyed that. So by the time that I graduated, I thought, hey, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to be a graphic designer. And what's funny is, for anybody that knows Scott Nash, who is a well-known kidlit illustrator, he worked on Flat Stanley and some other odds and ends. He was running a company called Big Blue Dot that was in Watertown. Yeah, it was Watertown, Mass. And I went out and interviewed there. And then later I found out that I actually met Scott when I was at that point. I didn't know much about him beyond he ran this company. And later I found out like he's, you know, this big kidlit guy, and I have am friends with him now and things of that sort. But at the time I interviewed and it did not work out. I was not skilled enough, nor was I prepared for that type of work. I was like, I'll try this. And I had not built up enough of a portfolio or understanding of what I was supposed to be doing. And so I went and talked with that didn't get that job. Ended up in animation because I needed a steady paycheck, and animation sort of made sense for me at the time. That I had friends that did it, and so it was like there was an opportunity, so I switched to that. After about 4 years doing that, at the time I had gotten a couple of editorial gigs, and when I say editorial gigs, I'm going to stress they were jobs. Did they pay well? Not necessarily. They paid. I admit they paid, but they just weren't the highest paying job that was out there, and so longevity at that pay was not great. And so I needed insurance and all these other things, and so I got a job working at this animation studio. And luckily, I got a job there because I met my wife, and that's where all that love and spark happened. Thornock Studios. I went to school at RISD, and so my impression of what I needed to do to start was kind of a little bit off. Let's put it that way. Wherein I thought that there were certain things that would just be really easy, and I would make these, leaps of faith in my career, and then it would be a cakewalk, and that's not necessarily true. But while I was at the animation studio, I was getting a few like editorial gigs here and there, or a few jobs that came to be, and then eventually I had a friend, a former roommate who was in the kidlit industry, Jarrett Krasaska, who I don't know if people know who that is, but who was going out on a book tour and could not teach a class there, and said, "Hey, would you like to teach? I can put in a good word for you." And I said, "Sure, why not?" Now, I also want to add in, I was the shy kid. I was the kid who would never raise his hand in class. I was the kid who never wanted to say anything out of fear. And so that idea of talking up in class was so scary, yet for some reason the idea of teaching sounded like fun. And so I got a job teaching, and it was just a single class. It was at night. I would work in the animation studio, and then at night I would go teach this class. And sort of really quickly, like the first few days, admittedly, I was like nearly throwing up out of nerves, and I was not prepared in a way that I probably should have been, but I enjoyed it. And it was very quick for me to go, oh, this is something I could do for a long time. And so I immediately went back to grad school so I could sort of pursue it as a career. And so I went and got my master's in visual design. And here's a little tip for anybody out there that's considering getting a master's. I absolutely believe in the idea that if you already have a degree in art, that you do not go back and get a degree in the same thing. So in other words, I already had a BFA in illustration. I'm not going to go for a illustration MFA. And the reason why I say that is I think it's better to expand than potentially to repeat. And so when I was in that program, I was doing stuff that I considered more designy or more fine art or things of the sort, but it wasn't really like traditional illustration that I do now of any sort. And so the idea was to grow. And in turn, I think that has helped me throughout time, because now my understanding of design work, or like my knowledge of type and things of that sort, is that much better because of that experience. So I did that. I started teaching, and I was doing editorial work for quite some time. Wow, this is a long story. I'm sorry this is going on so long. And I thoroughly enjoyed the teaching, etc. and whatnot. I had an agent that was primarily focused on editorial work for me and whatnot, and I got work along that lines. And then the agent stopped wanting to work with illustrators, and so all of a sudden I was out an agent, and I tried to figure out like, okay, what's my next step? And the step that I ended up leaning into was just saying, I'm going to go out there and do the stuff on my own. And it seemed to be okay for a little bit, but just stress-wise with teaching and other things, it made more sense for me to start to say, okay, I need an agent again. And so I found an art agent. That art agent, I'm still with, a place called Eye to Eye Art. So I, the number 2, I, art.com. And they're a lovely agency out of Canada, just as the name, as the country implies, Canada, they're lovely. And I got a lot of work through them, primarily in editorial. And then at one point, they came in with an offer for working on a kid's book. And I was like, what is this? This sounds interesting, because, I wasn't going to rule it out. And so I took the job, and it was my first kids book, and it was really fun. And it made me question, do I want to do kids book for a longer period of time? Let's put it that way. And I did. And so I went to a SCBWI conference. I met my literary agent there, and there was some negotiation between the two agencies to figure out, is it even feasible for me to have a literary agent and an art agent, and how do you separate that work? And there was some negotiation that had to happen, but eventually we came to a conclusion that I'm enjoying. Sorry to everyone who's already heard. There's not a lot of people that heard this whole thing before, but I really enjoyed that sort of kidlit stuff. And then I found my literary agent, and ever since I've had that literary agent, the all the work that is literary has sort of come from her, or goes towards her, should it come in from clientele on the outside in the real world of sorts. And it has, when I first got that first book, I did the first book in Procreate because it was brand new. It was on one of the first iPad Pros that was ever, I may have been generation 1 for the iPad Pro. However you say it. I'm looking for my eraser. Sorry, folks. Might have to move some of this paper here for a minute if I can find my eraser. Where is it? Is it here? This is the problem of a messy desk, and a very messy desk it is. It's got to be here somewhere. It's got to be like right in front of me, and I don't see it. If anybody spots it before I do, holler. Oh, there it is. Found it. And ever since then, I've been getting work in that sort of kidlit arena on a regular basis. The first books that I had were primarily with my literary agent, were written by me. But then soon thereafter, I just started doing a lot of work for other people's books. And I didn't mind it. I think it's absolutely fine to work on. But it got to a point where I wasn't making a lot of my own writing because I was going from one person's book to the next. Plus, I was teaching full time. And so it was just hard to manage. Now that I've gotten up there in the years, I'm starting to rethink sort of like how much time I put into my own writing versus working on someone else's. And so all of that sort of culminates in what you see before you today, which is also chaotic and challenging in its own way. So, I don't know, long-winded story. That's the history. But I'm happy with the sort of direction I'm going. I think kidlit is probably it for a majority of the time. Now, obviously, if editorial work rolls in, I still have my art agent. And so if work comes in that is not kidlit, I have them to sort of bring in that kind of work. And every once in a while, they bring up some offer, and it's a question of just timing in that case. But for the most part, that's the gist of the story. Long-winded. Boom. Thank you. Are there questions that people have, like artsy questions or challenging questions of how do you do A, B, or C kind of situation that I can help with? I'm trying to find, I need to put some other boats down here, and I'm thinking like maybe I make them in a color that, I'm trying to be careful about the color palette that I have on this. So I'm not introducing too many new colors, but also trying to create like interesting batches. So like, the equivalent of like, this is more of that sort of warmish tone that's not the same yellow as the pants, and that can be a boat that's down in here and things of the sort. So Sea Dragon Soda, awesome name. What kind of warm-up exercise do you do for loosening up and busting blocks? That is a fabulous question. In fact, that is such a good question because I'm teaching a class next semester that is sort of the same concept. It's called Breakout as the class. For any students that are listening, that's what the class is going to be. This is the sort of play. Some of this is, again, not that everything is going to be as like there's not a perfect answer to all of this. I get artist block sometimes and it struggles, but a lot of the times what I found is that I need to step away from the artwork for a little bit, come back to it, and then all of a sudden, like, things are a little bit easier. I'm not saying that's perfect for everyone's situation. Sometimes you need to step away for a longer period of time and whatnot, but the things that I do to sort of get myself going, not necessarily from artist block, but just like start making, is I tend to work on making interesting shapes. There's that classic game of like the Doodle game where you draw a shape and then you got to find a way to make a cool character out of it. So like here, I'll do one just because I feel like doing it tonight, so I can do it. I have that power to say yes, I'm going to do this. So let's find. I'm going to do the scrap here. I'm going to draw a shape. I'm going to do it with a lighter pencil here. So I don't know if this will show up, but if I come in here and I say like that's the shape, hopefully I'm going to watch my video to see if it shows up first. So give it a second. Yeah, okay, it does show up. So now I'm going to come in here with a darker pencil and start to figure out like, okay, is there some fun thing to make out of the shape? And I could go and say like, this is a nose down here and it's a dinosaur with some eyes that's looking down at something. Or I could say this is like the body or the belly of something and its head is up here. But I'm going to see if I can do something that's a little bit more weird with this. My initial reaction in this is like, where can I find a head to fit this? And I actually like the fact that this is sort of squared up a little bit up here, so I'm going to find some way to like make that into something. And so let's see. I mean, the initial reaction I would have to this is like, could this be some pouch just because of the way that it's sitting? And then I might look at the idea of like, like let's say this is a present that's sitting in there. Right, so it's a Santa's sack that's there and some stuff. But I might start to go, okay, well, to add some variety to it, like maybe I can start to play and put some other things in here. So like, what if this is actually a giant sock here? And so here's my seam for the sock. Here's the heel on it. So instead of being Santa's sack, it's a overstuffed stocking that's hanging up here. We'll put it on a little like nail that's stuck in a what is that called? A mantle of some sort. And so it's just like it's overstuffed with things. And maybe to make sure that sells that it's overstuffed, what I'm gonna do is get a normal size sock in here next to it that's sort of hanging, that maybe has like a candy cane sticking out of it. That's it. And so like clearly someone's the Santa's favorite, right? And so I would probably do something like the same seam, the same heel, sort of, etc. So they feel sort of connected. And then maybe you have one other one over here that's maybe facing this direction that has some lumps of coal. This is the bad kid that's down here, and maybe this one has like stripes on it to make sure it sells in a different way. And then all of a sudden it's that little shape has become sort of a story. Bigfoot's mantle, yeah, this is Bigfoot's. But that idea of like, okay, just by starting with that shape, it's fun to make and explore what you can get out of it. And so I tend to, when I work, I start with a lot of shape making of what can I do with a shape to add excitement to my piece. And oftentimes I aim for a shape that is not necessarily the most obvious shape to play with. And so like if I'm doing something that is a meant to be a face, I'm going to play with something that is not proportionately a standard face shape, and see what I can get away with when it comes to something like that. I'm just trying to figure out where I want to put these before I glue them down. I don't want them to look like they're perfectly overlapped in some way, and also maybe they're maybe they're up there like that, and I can put one other little tiny one there, and this little yellow boat can be here, and then maybe I'll put another one back over here of some sort, and he's got to have one big one or a couple of them underneath his or in his sleeve there. It's a question of, do I want that to cross that leg? I kind of like the idea the leg is a little bit separate. Maybe I'll make this one a little smaller. Hold on one second. Illustrator, I see that you wrote something. Give me a second and I'll get to it. Make that one a little smaller so it fits in there. That's a little better, like that. Okay. When you showed the sketch earlier on another piece of paper, there was a short squat character, kind of looked like a chunky owl. What is it? Oh, this, I don't know if it's, I'm assuming it's this. This is from last week, which we posted today, I think, on Instagram. I'm assuming this is the one you're talking about. It's a cat that's Jack be nimble, Jack be quick, that's jumping over a candlestick. Either that or it's the teapot that you're looking at, that maybe this one, which was I'm a Little Teapot Short and Stout. They are sketches from previous sessions that have just been sitting there waiting for someone to call them out and say, oh, aren't those beautiful? What other questions can I answer? What do people want to know? Thornock Studios, I don't know if you're still listening, but congratulations on the book. I saw, I feel like I was recently, but that a book is coming out with your work, and we in this house are very excited to see that because we are fans of yours. And so congratulations if you're still listening. The teapot is so cute. Thank you. I was jokingly fishing for compliments, but thank you. You didn't need to. You didn't need to add compliments, although, you know, keep them coming. Keep them coming. So let me see. I'm going to put this boat here, down about here, and then I need to do another little boat somewhere up in that range, and that'll probably be this one. But I need it to be taller. There's going to be a different shaped boat like this. How many sketches do you do to achieve your terrific compositions? Well, look at you, Teacher Marin. You get an A+ for the day. Sucking up to the teacher. I get it. Oh, April 1st, Thornock Studios. Awesome. We are, that's like, what is that? That's like a week and a half away? Something like that? Yeah. Roughly a week and a half away. Very excited. We're very excited. It looked beautiful. Teacher Marin, yeah, that's how many sketches do I do? Normally one. Don't tell anybody, but normally one. And the reason I only do one oftentimes is because I'm lazy, which is partially true. And sometimes it's also the sketch for me is not about the details. The sketch for me is about getting the idea down, and then later I apply those details to make it pretty, or like move stuff around. And so, like tonight, there were 3 sketches. I'll show you the 3 sketches I was thinking about tonight, and it's 3 different sort of stories related to Alfred Moltop. Wow, I just drew a blank. Alfred Boltop Stormalong. There we go. Who this is about. And the other sketches, where'd those go? Oh, they're over here. So story-wise, I did not like this sketch, but the idea of one of the things about him is his ship was so big that the mast had a hinge in it, which I need to put the mast in eventually here, had a hinge in it to allow him to collapse the mast because otherwise it would scrape the moon. And then one of the stories of how he died was this. He got into a fight with a boat captain, and what it was this is around the time when the steam engine started to come into play, and he saw smoke coming out of the steam engine, or I don't know if it's steam engine, but he saw smoke coming out of a boat, and he thought it was on fire, so he went and poured seawater in it, and caused the captain to be upset because he basically ruined the boat. And then they had a battle, i.e., a race, to see who was faster. And Stormalong won, but in the process wore himself out to a point where he was collapsed. And that's how you ended up with the death of Stormalong. And so I thought I would try to capture that in the piece, but I now I'm leaning more towards this like wait, I'm trying to think how I cut this. Hold on a second. I think I have to do it like that. Yeah. I like this visual of him picking up all these boats a little bit more, and so that's what I'm going for now. Trying to figure out like how big. I don't want those to be the same proportion. Like I don't want. That's iffy. I mean, I guess I can probably get away with that right there. So if I stick that down, yeah, I'd love to see how that's condensed into tombstone. It's in it like when you start to look at folklore or folk tales, especially like American folk tales. There's the ones that we all know, like Paul Bunyan and John Henry and things of the sort. But there's so many really interesting ones that people don't know about. Like I did not know about Stormalong until I was doing some research. Or there was like, I mean, obviously there's like Wild Bill Hickok and some of these people who are like real people that actually have tall tales told about them. But there's some really like, if you go into like indigenous tribes, some of the folk tales that are from that, or things like that that have expanded and become stories that go beyond sort of the cultural influence of, or the cultural statement of just like, oh, this is an indigenous story, and become something bigger and broader than that, and sort of speak to a larger group too. But there's also just like weird French Canadian things and all these other strange stories that are out there that I just didn't know about. And I was just going through folktales tonight before I started this, just to see if there's anything else that would strike my fancy. And I saw something that I was like, oh, I've never even heard this one. That's so cool. And so, you know, venturing down that road can be awfully fun. Put that way. Okay, I need some boats in his arms. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab some of these sort of, which way do those need to go? Yeah, they need to go like that. So I want some boats that sort of poke out of his arms here that are like, he's got them in the crease of his elbow, right in there, something like that. I don't like how close that gets to his nosy tip, though. Yeah, I said nosy tip. What of it? Hold on a second. I want to see what someone says there. I think it's Matthew Berg's here. Hold on a second. Let me get these stuck down. I also might stack a couple of these boats so they're literally on top of each other. Let's see. It says, current project is about a lesser known folklore, fearsome creatures. Have you ever heard of those? I have not heard of those. I have a student right now who's working on some like New England based, which is not everybody's area, I understand that, but New England based folklore, and one who's doing sort of like folklore from different areas of the country and whatnot. There's so many of them out there that it's a matter of just getting people to know about them. And whoa, that's the right cut. Yes. Okay. What I'll do is figure out like what angle do I want this at here? Maybe like that. Do I want it to be facing this way? I think I need like one more and then that. Maybe this one sits there like this. Yeah, I think that's probably it. And then I will overlap the other one. Let me see. I was looking up Scottish folklore earlier before this started, and seeing what there was in Irish folklore and Nordic and Spanish and whatnot. And I will tell you, here's the kicker, and what made me do this one is because I've already known this one, and so I kind of knew a visual that I could do with it fairly quickly. Whereas I would want to do a little bit more research and some of the folklore for some of the stories that I didn't know would require a pretty hefty lift of reading before I started tonight. And I was like, I don't know if I have the time or patience to sit down and try to read that before we had to be on the air. And so I will probably get to those at some point, but just maybe not tonight. Let me trim that accordingly. Let's see if I can get that in there. So we have a couple of boats that are smashed together right there. Yes, a fun way to learn. Yeah, I mean, honestly, the one thing that I would want to do is probably do some stuff that are like African folklore from different countries in Africa. But again, nursery rhymes are easy; they're not long. Folk tales are a different story. Folk tales require a little bit more of a lift, and so if I were going to do those, I'd want to give them their due respect of time. And so right now is not the time to do that. Let me see if I'm going to get a boat like this. That's the wrong angle there. I got to cut it a little bit tighter. Oh yeah, Matt John's the Celtic folklore about the landscapes. Yeah, Paul Bunyan created the Grand Canyon. I think it was like, I forget what it was that plowed it out. It may have been Babe the Blue Ox, but I feel like there was something specific about it that happened. And then the mountains, the Rocky Mountains, were created because of like tilling up the soil, or I don't remember all of it. It's been a while since I've read it, but it is the landscape. What's funny about someone like Paul Bunyan is my assumption when I was young, because I grew up in Minnesota, and Minnesota had this attachment to Paul Bunyan. In Brainerd, Brainerd, there's a giant Paul Bunyan statue and things. I always assumed that Paul Bunyan was this like Midwest Minnesota thing, and then I found out moving to New England that Maine also feels like, oh, Paul Bunyan's from Maine, and then you find out in Canada, oh no, Paul Bunyan's from Canada, and the tale has extended out further beyond what my original perception of that story was. And so now it's just everybody's got him, but there's still a little bit of me that goes, I think he's actually from Minnesota. I think that's what it is. I know there's like Canadians think like, oh, he was a Canadian fur trapper. There's also the story of Paul Bunyan's little brother. And I don't remember what his name is, but he was probably a jerk. You know, his little brother probably had all sorts of problems that arose because he was dumb. His little brothers are dumb. If anybody wants to look it up and see what Paul Bunyan's, I think it's his little brother. I could be wrong. Which I think he was like half the size, or not half, but like halfway between people and the height of Paul Bunyan. Okay, let's see if I can get these sails in now. And what I want to do is try, I don't know if they have any pure, like white. I guess I could use scrap paper, like sketch paper. What would that look like? Is that too bright? Let me see. It's not Pecos Bill. No. Pecos Bill is a whole different story. But yeah, if anybody can find that out for me and bring it up on here. Yeah, I don't think it's gonna be. I think it's gonna be too bright. Maybe what I need to do is get something that is more in line with the background here, like some tone, and put in there for some of those sails. It's a question of what's the right. I might need to actually make a little bit more of an adjustment to it here. So let's paint for a second. Let's see if I can get a little bit of paint on this sucker again. I did a Google search, found the name Cordwood Pete. That's what it is. Cordwood Pete. You are correct. Is that Matthew Berg's? Was it little brother or was it like cousin or something? There's some relationship. And Cordwood Pete is also got. I mean, that's a cool name, admittedly. It's not as well known as Paul Buns, and yeah, I call them Paul Buns. What of it? But Cordwood Pete is also a pretty cool name. Let's see. I'm gonna try this. Try a little white in the mix to push that color some other directions. I want to get some of these other colors that were out here the same. Cordwood Pete. I remember reading about Paul Bunyan that he had to be moved when he was young. He was put into and I made an illustration of this ages ago, into a ox cart to be moved along as a baby because he would cry so loud that, similar to people driving their kid around in a car to get him to lull them to sleep. Paulie Bunbuns, nice, that's good, Lauren. To lull them to sleep, people would drive their kids around in the car. And Paul Bunyan, what they would do is put him in an ox cart and drive him up and down the hills of like French Canada or something of that sort. He was 4'9". Man, he's a little guy. I thought he was bigger than that. That's a bummer. I mean, he deserves some respect, people. You can't just like make him the antithesis of Paulie Bunbuns. I'm not saying short people are bad. I want to make sure that's clear. I mean, I am tall, and so I'm clearly more superior than anybody that is short. But but I could have sworn he was a big dude, but I guess not. I was wrong. Was he on The Sopranos? Oh, Paulie Bunbuns. Yeah. No pancakes equals short. Yes. Maybe that was it. Maybe I got too many pancakes when I was a kid, and I ended up big and tall. I will tell you, as an illustrator, big and tall is not the best thing in the world. Somebody has back problems from being hunched over. If you can guess who, you get extra credit. I'm talking about me. I'm gonna let this dry now. I gotta do all the detail work on this thing and get it up to par, but we're getting there. We are getting there. He has a bigger head than what I intended. A bigger nose in particular, but I'll get that taken care of. I like his yellow pants though. Dry, dry, dry. Dry, 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 dry. This needs to be the billowy sails. They're catching the wind. Whoa. Let's try this out. They can't be too billowy. It's gotta be squared off at one point. Okay, that should work. Matt John, 6'1". Yeah, I'm 6'2". It's the pain, the aches and pain of being far superior in life. Dissing people left and right. It's aches and pains of being cool, Some of us have to suffer. I wish we didn't have to, but sometimes life doesn't always go your way, I used to have some pan pastels around here that I wish I had that were like a dark gray. 6'5"? What's it like touching the ceiling with your forehead every day? What's it what's it like? What's it like? I'm trying to think of tall jokes. Wait, Matt Johns, was that 6'1" too, or 6'2"? Mark, wait, what? I will say I was 6'2", 6'2" at one point in my life. I am now less than that. I'm 6'1.5", baby. And I'm saying the reason why is because I am shrinking. Some of us are old fuddy-duddies who are compressing. Compressing sounds funny. Too bad I couldn't dribble the ball. Yeah, that's the other thing. And obviously you probably got it more than me. But everybody assumed that I could dunk. And I can't. I have no vertical. Not a single foot off the ground. I'm like inches off the ground if I jump. And so it's a little sad to get me out on a basketball court. I will try my darndest to have leaps, but I ain't got it. I'm also not a good shot either. I was when I played Little League, when I was little. When I played Little League, the thing that I heard the most was "Good eye, Mark, good eye," when I was at bat, because I would not swing at anything because I was afraid I wouldn't hit it very far or that I would miss it, and so I just didn't swing. And most of the time in Little League, it was a ball, and so I got walked a lot. AJ, 6'1", last 30 plus years. Oldness has me dropping inches too. Yeah, baby. We's getting decrepit, falling apart. I just got my first crown the other day, which to me is like a sign, like, oh yeah, my teeth are falling apart. And as long as I don't have to get dentures, I'm good. But I had some cereal this morning with a little bit of milk in it, and when I took the bowl and had the milk at the last second, the shock of cold that hit that newly capped tooth was not great. It really rocked my boat, and so I was not happy about that. But you know, there's only it was short lived, and so I did okay. But man, I did not like that cold. It hit me. How else are we falling apart, people? Toothpicks. So I'm not serious. You got toothpicks? That's my I'm not calling you my grandma, but my grandma had toothpicks. She had a portable a toothpick that was reusable. So it wasn't wood. It was this plastic toothpick, and it was gross. It was nasty. And I remember being a kid and being horrified by that thing that she would pull out and be like, "I'm gonna pick my teeth." Not that she sounded like that, but she did have a little bit of a southern accent. But it was always kind of this. It's like the equivalent of, for anybody that's ever had a mouth guard, and it gets kind of nasty after a while. That's what her toothpick was. At least in my opinion, that's what it was. It was a little nasty, if you ask me. Yeah, sustainability. More power to her. But if she dropped that on the ground and she said, pick that up, that is no longer part of this world to me, and I would walk by it in a heartbeat because it was gross. I still love her though. She's no longer with us, but it was she was a nasty lady. She would actually, even though she was like this old Southern Baptist woman, I think she would find it funny that I would call her a nasty lady. I think. I don't know. I'll have to check with family on that one, but she was a fun old broad. She was like super religious, and you couldn't swear around her or anything. But our family is a very jokey family, and she was part of that and would be willing to sort of poke fun at people if need be. And I appreciated that about her. Lauren knew her. Lauren can speak to that. She was willing to take a joke. I'm not saying that's what killed her, but maybe we did joke a little too much. It got real dark. What am I talking about now, people? Why would I say such a thing? What else we got? Shutters. I'm trying to think if there's like funny stories about my grandma. I mean, there were stories. There was funny stories about what happened to my grandma, but I don't know if there's like super funny things about like certain things that she did that I'd be like, oh man, everybody's got to hear this thing. I don't know. I mean, my mother dumped that grandmother out on the ground out of a wheelchair. If anybody wants to hear that story, my mother decided that old Grandma Thomas didn't deserve to be sitting around like a lazy bum and being pushed around. And so as she was pushing her into a building, she accidentally, of course, dumped that grandma on the ground and sent her to the hospital. Lauren, are you hearing this? Yeah. Like, to me, it's funny. Not everybody's going to find this funny, but... Oh, the whole story? Yeah, my mom was pushing her in one of those, like, standing walker wheelchair things where, like, it's a walker if you face it one direction, but there's also a seat with it. And so my mom was pushing her in that, and my grandma was facing... You're supposed to, like, have the person facing you sitting in the chair, and you sort of push it in a way. But my mom pushed it and then hit a curb or something of the sort, like some break in the concrete. And because of the way that my grandma was facing, she just dumped right out of it and landed on the ground. And I don't know, I think she got like beat up, got some bruises, and they were worried about a concussion, which I don't think actually happened. I don't think she had a concussion, but and so she ended up at the hospital. But we got to tease my mother about it. And rightfully so, because my mother had tried to off her own mother. And then the best story that came out of my my own mother, about my grandmother. For anybody that cares, this story it's the best thing my mother has done comedy wise ever. My grandmother fell on some ice. Again, she was probably in her like late 80s, early 90s, something like that. Fell on some ice and hit her face and severely bruised her face. And the equivalent of, if you have a face that's like this, here's a face with a nose, and eye, she had a bruise that went like this, up and over and sort of on the, brow and on the cheeks and things of the sort. And it was all sorts of colors and whatnot, but it was like that. And so my mom sent a picture around. This is my grandma here. And she needs glasses, though. Grandma Thomas, is that you? That's my Grandma Thomas. Anyways, she fell, made these giant bruises like this, and my mom sent a photo to everybody in the family with her with these giant bruises and said, photo. She sent a card that the image was this on the outside, and on the inside, it said roughly, someone started early celebrating for Mardi Gras. On the inside, totally making fun of it, looking like a mask. And to me, it was top-notch comedy. that she would go to the trouble of making fun of her own lovely mother by using that phrasing. I thought it was so good that the family would, or that my mother would do something so harsh on my grandmother like that. And so the fact that it went around to the family, like she didn't just say it to us, that she put it out there and sent it to the rest of the family is what I think is like the funniest thing. I don't know if I want that. Let's see. We'll figure this out as we get there. Okay, let's get some nostrils in there. Let's get a little touch of pink on the nose. You get some of these other boats taken care of. I feel like I'm missing a color that I was working with earlier. Maybe not. What color was I doing that with? I guess that was that same one. So maybe I'll do it with these. These are the stripes on the boat. Boats. Boats. I do want like a mustardy yellow color here. That could work. Yes. I have to put sails on these boats and things of the sort too, but where is that? There we go. Any children's books that are coming out that I'm really excited about? Well, speak of the devil. We got books by Andy Smith, AJ, who's on, as well as Thornock Studio, who's on. We have, I'm trying to think, there's a couple of books that I'm excited about. The one I mentioned earlier tonight that the one that we got this week that was, I think is absolutely lovely, Dear Bookstore by Emily Arrow and Genevieve Gobeau or something. I think that's how you say it. Godbaut. I'm guessing on that. So bear with me if that's not correct. But that one is gorgeous. And I don't even use that word gorgeous very often, but boy, is it gorgeous. It's fab. It's top notch. And I'm trying to think of those other ones that I'm like, get a load of this one, folks. I know there's more. What are some of the other ones, Lauren? What are we looking at? My wife will if she's paying attention, and normally she does, but if she's paying attention, she'll put some of the books that we're waiting to come out. Jess Hannigan has, what's that? It's not Bear in the Woods, is it? No. Bear Out There? Yeah, that's coming out. Why? Bear in the Woods. What is that? What? Oh, Adam Rex's book, Echo? Uh, who does? Oh, Jared Chapman has a good one, yeah. I'm looking at, just put Deer Bookstore on our wish list. Really beautiful. Yes, Floral Bikini. It is stunning. Stunning. What's that, Lauren? Monty and the Mushroom by Jared Chapman, yeah. I'm trying to think if there's honestly there's too many, and trying to keep up with them all is a nightmare. Because there's so many good books coming out all the time. Yeah, just write them in the comments. My wife's yelling them out at me from upstairs. she's saying them like she's expecting me to relay them all to you, but I only have so much time in my life. I can't do it all, people. Okay, I am going to put some little lines down the boat here that are, I want to make sure they're a little irregular. I don't want them to be perfect. They're going to be the railings along the edge of this boat. And I'll do the same up there, but let me get these in here. I'm going to make it miss this fit. And then I'm going to draw a little, I'm trying to think, do I want to do white? Let me see what it looks like. Yeah, I'm okay with white. This idea of the railing that runs around the boat here. I don't particularly like how it cuts through that foot, but dims the brakes. What I'm going to do is put the same thing up there. Let's see. These sound interesting. My house is slowly turning into a children's book library. Same here. We just had a cleaning of the old library Hoffmanicus here the other day, and there was a lot. What was really interesting to me is there was a lot of S's. Like, we did it by author last name, and there were a lot of S's, very few T's. I know that's not very interesting to people, but it's interesting to me. That I would expect there would be like quite a few people with a last name that started with a T. Very few. I thought it was interesting. I'm not saying it's like groundbreaking or anything of the sort, but I thought it was interesting. So deal with it. Let me give him a little white cuff there. Oh, I need to put his other hand in. Let's cut that other hand. I know I had cut out. Oh, this is what I cut it out of. Perfect. Hold on a second. Let me just cut this little. Stinky hand here. One more finger to cut. Whoa. There we go. Is that too big? Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay. Beep bop 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 bop. Beat up bop bop bop. Yeah. What other questions we have, folks? Come on, come on, come on. We got roughly an hour left max for me to answer questions. I'm sure there's some out there. A question about what's a question I could pretend that someone asked about how I landed such a lovely wife. Oh, that's very nice of you. I bought her off the internet. Is that right, Lauren? Is that how it works? Expensive. Floral bikini. What's the next folktale I'm going to work on? I don't know. You got one you want me to work on? You find. I don't know why I'm like, you do this. You find one that you think I should work on, and maybe I will. Yeah. Let's give him his beard. He needs a silly beard, which means I need that little tiny brush. Did I throw that in here? Please tell me I didn't put that in there. Okay, no, I didn't. Where is that tiny brush? There's that tiny brush. I'm gonna get a little bit black. Let me get some of this paper out of the way. Ba-ba-ba-ba-ba. Happy to research. Yeah, no, people, if you want to throw me ones you want me to do, put it in my DMs. Say like, hey, can you do this one? I don't know which ones are cool. It needs to have the ability to have some sort of like kid vibe to it. So it can't be just like murder, death stories. Um, but as long as it's got something that can have a little bit of a kid vibe to it, then yeah, I might be able to swing it. It's a matter of like, part of the challenge of illustration is figuring out how to make it work for you, meaning like to fit what I want to do, and maybe there's a way to get that to work, even if it does have some murder, death. Um, okay, here we go. Here's a question. Here's a couple of them. Teacher Marin, is there something you should never do in their portfolio, or is there something one should never do in their portfolio or submission? Uh, talk about physical ailments of your grandmother. Um, I would say, we had this question today that popped up in a class, and we had a student, lovely student, who had some really lovely sort of fine artwork. We were talking about sort of portfolio, and the work isn't always, in this case, because it's student work, it's not always like purely illustration. There's other stuff. And they had some fine art work that was in there. And one of the things was a figure study of a nude model. And in reality, not a big deal. Like, I was making sure I was stressing, like, this is not an argument against the female form or anything of the sort, but more so looking at it and saying, like, okay, who's the audience that you're pitching to? And are they someone that would be understanding of that sort of imagery, which I think most art directors would be like, sure, we get that. And there's not this like, ooh, you drew a nude body, I can't believe it. But it also becomes just a, hey, what's appropriate, what's going to be something that might shock the system a little. And again, most art directors will look at that and go like, oh, no big deal. But on first pass, you're scrolling through stuff and it's like, oh, here's some cute little characters. And then all of a sudden it's like nipple. And they might be a little taken aback. And so there was this question that we had, this argument of like, or not argument, this discussion that we had around sort of like, is there something that that you alter because of who you're sending to versus the work that is representative of everything you do. And so there was lots of talk about sort of like, you may not want to be putting in all these dark images if you're aiming towards kid work. You're not, probably don't want to put in like blood and guts into something in a portfolio if you're aiming towards something that's directed at primarily like a kid lit audience. Not because it's going to shock people, but just, again, is your messaging on point? The other thing I would say is the stuff I would avoid is just making sure that that you are not spreading yourself. It's I forget what the phrase is, like basically that you're not spreading yourself so thin that you're not good at anything. It's master something of something, master of none. I can't remember what the adage or the idiom or whatever it is. Adage. that comes from that. But that idea of like, don't put everything in your portfolio just because you've done a variety of things. Go through and figure out. I think it's better to. I mean, there's a limit of you want to get a certain amount of work in a portfolio or stuff that you send out submission. Like if they're requiring a certain amount. Jack of all trades, yes, master of none. Thank you. However, I think it's better to show less work that is quality than more work that is not. And so, if you have work that you're questioning whether it should be in there, maybe that's something that you start to say, okay, well, yeah, maybe I don't need to put it in there because it, aesthetically is not up to par with everything else that's there. I also think, there's the risk of putting in too much work wherein it's hard for someone to sort of look at and figure out exactly what you're trying to get out of it. And so like the equivalent of if you're putting in hundreds of pieces and you go like, they're all really good. It may be just image overload. And so you might want to just tone that down purely just based on the fact of like how much a person can process. So the rule of thumb that I was always taught, and I think is pretty solid, is 12 to 18 pieces max. Well, not 12 to 18 max, 10 to 18. Somewhere in that ballpark is a good portfolio. I tend to lean more on that like 12 to 16 range. I think 10 may be too few. I think 18 may be too many. And then it becomes a question of like, which pieces, and if you have 25 pieces to pick from, you might choose for one clientele that you're sending to or, submitting to or whatever it may be, a different group of images than what you would send to the next group. And so I would think that you, sorry, I'm trying to concentrate on also getting his nice thick beard there. He's got a thicker beard than he does hair. I think it's probably good to just look at the work. And again, going back to what I talked about earlier of not worrying as much about sort of style and how connected it is in style, but connected in voice. And so there's different ways to look at that portfolio to sort of help hone it. Let's go back to Thornax Studios. How are you able to balance your academic career with your personal work? Are there enough hours in the day? No. Is there ever? No. I mean, professional work, like the academic work, part of the challenge is the job that I have right now. I am the chair of the division, which means I go to a lot of meetings, and I have a lot of sort of not necessarily things I have to tend to like oversight wise, but just there's a lot of minutia to deal with, and I wish that I didn't have to deal with some of the the day-to-day operation, but that's the job. And what really is the challenge for me, like I like teaching's fun, but I also like the responsibility of something like this and having sort of oversight over bigger chunks of the school versus like just teaching my class and walking out. The downside is I also know all the challenges of a small independent art school, and I see that on a regular basis, and that can be I don't want to say disheartening, but it is a real challenge in the market right now with people who are either anti-college or are struggling to see the value of a 4-year degree. Those kinds of questions dog us for a long time, but have been more and more prevalent as the pandemic hit and other things of that sort. I think there's value to it. I don't think the value is what everybody thinks it is. Like, I think there's this impression that art school is intended to, well, this is getting way off topic of what you were asking, but I'm going to say it anyways. This impression that art school is there to teach you how to be a better artist. I don't think that's true. I think what art school is there for is to teach you how to be more creative and how to adapt. And that in turn can be used in your art. But art school, the thing that I think is probably the biggest benefit is the people that are there that you're able to talk to about your art and figure out how to make your art better. That are that is independent from uh, the actual making. So like having someone there to say, "Oh, I think you should try this," or "It'd be really interesting if you played around with this concept." I think is better at an art school, or is the thing that would be the star versus take out your brush and draw this line, and it needs to be drawn this way. As far as how to manage that, it is a struggle because my schedule is sort of all over the place. One day it's like tomorrow I don't teach, but I am also working on advising for the next semester. So I'm spending the day basically working with a bunch of students to figure out what their classes are going to be, or how to make their schedule work out to benefit what they want to do. And again, that takes time, and that takes. I mean, I'm getting paid for it, so it's not like um, it's it's for free, but it is something where like if I have deadlines or odds and ends that I need to get done, is that in the way? I don't want to say it's in the way because I think that sounds awful, but it's it is challenging to sort of squeeze the randomness of a day in. And so like my schedule tomorrow because of the advising is students signed up at different times and I have little gaps in between and like can I get stuff done in that time frame in between one advisee to the next. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Sometimes it's killing time until the next student walks in the door or things of the sort, and so that can be a little challenging, let's put it that way. um, you said uh, no wait, what? Oh, you said you took some writer classes. I think that's what you're asking there. It's. I think there's a typo there. Any resources you recommend for an illustrator wanting to self-author? So again, the writing things I took were through SCBWI. They were not writing courses in the sense of like an independent thing. It was through a conference, and so they had some sessions where you'd go and just as a participant in that conference, you'd go sit down and learn about that subject matter for the day, and then the next person would, or the next session would be about something else, whatever it was. And so I took a lot of writing ones there just because I thought it'd be beneficial for me. Admittedly, as a visual thinker, sometimes the people that were running them were not the most visual, and so they'd have this presentation and it wouldn't have a lot of visuals to it, and then just as this is probably like a ADHD sort of thing, I would start to sketch more, and then all of a sudden I get caught up in my sketch and not look up at what was being said, and that's a me problem, not a them problem. Um, the There are resources for writers and getting out there. I think the challenge with this is I don't know all the names and all the things that are out there, but there are lots of different little like workshops around. But getting yourself into an environment where you can see those names being listed and the options that are available is probably the best thing. So like getting yourself on some newsletters for different writing studios or for getting different conferences and whatnot. Like the SCBWI has multiple workshops that happen outside of the conference. And it's a matter of you need to be on the newsletter to find out when those are rolling into town and when they're not. So give me a second. I'll look and see what the next question is because I feel like there was another question after that. I'm putting sails on some of these boats. You said no, that's the same thing. Oh, you already fixed it in the second one, so I already saw it. I get it. I'm also an associate professor, but at a large open enrollment university. Chris, what school are you at? Remind me. I know. I feel like I looked it up at some point, but I just don't remember right now. I'm actually waiting. I'm an associate professor right now, and I'm waiting for the next the next rank to come in, which I applied for and I better get, to be a full professor. I forget what I was talking with students today about, and they were asking me about, like, were you this way and a weirdo when I was in grad school? And I had to say yes, which was totally true. And I don't remember what it was that we were talking about. Oh, Utah Valley University. That's right. I know I had seen that before. I just can't remember off the top of my head. Um, do you have the same problem of, like, schedule of teaching? I don't know what your teaching schedule is like. We're supposed to have London Land, sorry, on coming up, and he's a full-time professor at Syracuse. And what was interesting is the day that we're having him on, he's teaching full-time that day, just like I am, but his schedule is slightly different because the classes are 4 hours long, or ours are 3 hours, but our 3 hour classes happen maybe more often. And so, like, we meet twice a week for 3 hours, and some classes meet for 6 hours, and there's all sorts of weird variables. I mean, technically ours are not 3 hours; they're 2 hours and 40 minutes, or 2 hours and 50 minutes, or something. I forget what it is, but it's easiest just to say 3 hours. Whatever, 8:20 to 11, so 2 hours and 40 minutes long. I have to do the math there, get that to work in my head. Where did I go to grad school? 2.5 hours twice a week. We also teach a 3. You teach a 3 too? Lucky. We teach a 3-3, which I thought was light. There's a school near us that does a 4-4. And I don't want that. But I also, now, that being said, I do a 2-2 because I'm a chair, so I end up getting a course release. So because I'm in meetings all the time dealing with stuff, instead of teaching 3 classes, I teach 2 classes each semester. But it's the equivalent of doing a 3-3. It's just meetings instead. But man, a 3-2, Lucky. What a nice spring you have. So right now you're only teaching 2. No fair. So where did I go to grad school, and what was the experience like? Good question. I went to a state school here, or not. I'm in New Hampshire now, but at the time I was in Massachusetts, called the University of Massachusetts North Dartmouth. Sorry. My wife went there for undergrad, and they have this thing that was called the College of Visual and Performing Arts. And what it was a basically an art school within a art school within a big university. And so when I was in grad school, or before I went to grad school, I was thinking, I was looking up different schools and places that I could go and things of the sort. And I was looking up all these names, like, I could go to Yale, and I could go back to RISD and things of the sort. And eventually I realized that it was not critical for me to immediately go out and get another crazy name on the list. RISD kind of did that for me, and I'm in no way am I putting down any other school, but I started to look at it differently and say, who cares about the name? Who cares about the location? Who cares about that kind of stuff? And instead started to focus on what would be the most value for my buck kind of situation. And talking to my wife about her experience at the school, it made sense to sort of think about this school that was not originally on my radar, and for a couple of reasons. And the reason why I thought that it really sort of made sense for me: 1, it was a state school, so I paid less money. 2, it was a school that would allow me to teach while I was there. And so not only did it not cost me as much money, I actually got a little paycheck from it in the process. 3, it also was in between a bunch of other, like, art schools. So here in Boston, there's at the time it was SMFA, which is now Tufts University. There was Mass Art, which is, I think, the only state art school in the country. There was RISD, they're all within like, I don't know, 45-minute drive of the state school of North Dartmouth. And so I was having teachers that were teaching at all these other locations at this state school, which was lovely, especially for someone who was looking for that, like, who cares about the name? It's about who you're studying with kind of situation. It was lovely to have some of these names pop up that I was, looking for that kind of experience or that kind of knowledge um, at a fraction of the price of going to something like RISD again. And so I got it all done in 2 years. I went back and went for visual design versus illustration or graphic design. It was sort of this lovely in between sort of stage. And then while I was there, it started out that I was going to do like primarily graphic design. That was the goal when I entered, primarily around color. Halfway through, I sort of started getting interested in graphic design, in, or let's say typography and word studies. What is that? Lexicography? I'm drawing a blank on it. I think it's lexicography. Anyways, I started getting really interested in that, and then by the time that I got out of there, I was doing more like paintings. Of course, you illustrate the you illustrate the illustration area. I used to, but I handed it off because it was now I moved up to the chair side, so it's like I oversee illustration, graphic design, animation, and our new Games, Toy, and Play program. Anyways, what was I saying? So I went back for visual design, ended up doing sort of paintings in the end, and some, illustration sort of electives of sorts while I was in grad school. But it was a good experience. I think the thing that I mentioned to students today, actually, in class, was I don't think it's great to go back to grad school right after you graduate from undergrad. And primarily this is built around that idea of you need some life experience to tell you what you really should be learning. And so rather than going and saying, hey, I'm going to go back to school because it delays my loans, I don't know if that's the best argument for going to grad school. And by the time that you figure out sort of what you want to do, I would even venture to say that you might have a better vision of, or you might have a totally different vision from what you think you want when you just leave school. And so I was telling students that, like, yeah, just give it some time. There's no rush. Go get a job. Go figure out, like, give yourself some time to percolate before you make that call and say, I need to go get this job or to this degree right now. Sornak. Yeah, you need to, like, the program that I was in, and hopefully no one from that grad school is listening right now that I'm talking about, but there were a couple of people that went directly from their undergrad program. And what really happened, and this is gonna, I don't know if this is easy to explain, but the way that I sort of talk about it is they ended up continuing their undergrad work, basically. So they were not doing really like new, inventive, or trying to expand what they were doing. They were kind of just doing a duplicate of what they were already doing when they were in undergrad. And it's not to say that that's the worst thing in the world, but when you compare that to people who had, like, there were people that were there that were in their like 40s, and you look at the work they were doing, and they clearly had this vision for what was important in their life and why spend this money to go for another couple of years, and the return on investment was much more important for those people who were coming back to it than the folks that were sort of coming straight out of school. And of course, everybody got a good education. Those people that came straight out of school, it was important for them to, they learned stuff along the way. But I just think that the value was maybe a little bit different, or the importance of going back to school hit different for those folks. And so I just think it's good to take the time. I see Matthew Berg says, I agree with that sentiment. I waited 4 years and my time out of school inspired my graduate work. Exactly. The stuff that I went back and did in grad school was wildly different than, and way more, even though I had some immaturity that showed up in it, was way more mature than the stuff I was doing in undergrad. Um, and then on top of that, the work that I did there, even though I'm an idiot on a regular basis and do dumb things as a person, uh, the work that I was doing after getting out of there, I think was heavily influenced by me realizing the value and having interest in the, what do I want to say, like my, how do I put this? This is a weird, like, how do I say this? It's late in the night. That's the problem. The value that I put into that work, even though it could be silly at times, has definitely influenced the way that I'm able to teach and the way that I think about projects. That even though my work is silly and dumb, I have a better understanding of why I do it. I have a better understanding of how to talk to students who are not even in my field of illustration. So like if I go into a painting class and have to teach a painting student, even though painting is not my forte, I have a better understanding about just general like not symbiotics and um, sort of critical theory and things that I learned while I was in there that can be applicable to a larger audience just in turn. So if that makes any sense, I don't know if anybody out there is going like, I don't know what he's saying, but there's, I'm adding in some hurricane. This is a hurricane. It's just these little swirls. They're up here in the corner. I'm gonna put some little swirls along here. That's that hurricane. You know what a hurricane looks like? It looks like that. Um, I like Thornaga. I like the statement there. I also think it takes time to get your professors out of your studio, decide who you are. That's a great way to put it. There was when I was in school, there was this. I want to say his name started with a J, like Jim or John or something like that. And he won't. I don't think he remembers who I am, and I don't really remember the full name there. But I always loved the story about him because it sort of hit the idea of like what grad school is. And the story that came out of it was this guy who was a painter came back to school thinking, I'm going to go back for, to grad school for painting. And he walked in, and everybody gets assigned an advisor sort of early on. And his advisor on sort of day one basically said, what do you want to do? And the guy said painting. And he goes, okay, give me all your brushes. And so the grad student handed him all of his brushes, and then the advisor said, okay, now go figure out what you want to do. And it was like, looking back on it, I understand what he was going at now. At the time I was like, what's going on here? But the student in particular, I say student, but he was, he wasn't old, but he was a student of he was older than a lot of the grad students, let's put it that way. Or maybe he was just had an older vibe. Grad students. Anyways, he uh, started to finger paint and got really into finger painting to the point wherein by the time that the first year was over, his advisor said, okay, here's all your brushes back. And the guy said, I don't want my brushes back. I don't need them. And he continued to finger paint for the rest of the time that he was in the grad program, and got so good at it, like ridiculously good at it. And he his paintings. The other thing that he added as a challenge for himself, which I thought was nuts, uh, he would only work with the color red in all of his paintings. And keep in mind, it sounds like, oh, he's just painting like abstract stuff. No, he was painting like landscapes and stuff. And he was painting it all with only red, which meant that he had to use all these different uh, tints and hues of red to get things like, um, what do I want to say? Like, you know, combining a cold red next to a warm red to give the effect of a cold color versus, like water against a sunlit sky or something like that. And he got really, really good at doing that. And his final thesis was, these beautiful giant red paintings. And had he not been in that environment and had that advisor not go, okay, rethink and learn to adapt and become something new, he probably would have just done paintings that were sort of in line with what he had been doing for years prior. And so I personally really appreciated the sort of approach that little twist took. Um, yeah, Thornock and Sea Dragon Soda, like super rad, and Crazy Owl Limitations. Um, I there's one of the things that I'm teaching this next semester again is this class called Breakout. And the idea of the class is the description basically is, hey, I don't. So everybody knows I don't like this beard. I'm gonna go change it up. Um, I'm gonna paint it a different way. The what was I saying? The idea of the class is that students get stuck in a style, and they get stuck in their way. And one of the things I've always loved to do is like, let's break those habits. Let's find ways to mess with that. And my general consensus with this is like, okay, let's force those habits in a new direction. And so, like in the past, I used to have an assignment with students in a drawing class where they had to create a new drawing device. Like they could not just use a paintbrush or a pencil or whatever. They had to create a new system for mark making. And or they had to put a limitation on how they could make marks. So like, if you're a righty, draw with your left hand. What happens if you can't draw with your hands altogether? How are you going to make an image? And how does that change your perception of mark making in general? Thornock, honestly, if you want to chat at some point, I can relay some class. I would love to sort of poke around and relay what we've done and to hear what you've done for classes. There's some really fun, weird classes that we've done that students have absolutely loved, and other classes, that they hate. But I would love to sort of hear sort of what's working for you and sort of relay what's working for us so we can cross pollinate. Shoot me a DM of just like, hey, what are some of the fun classes you've done, and I'll start that conversation and get stuff going back and forth. But that breakout class, my goal is I'm going to find ways to basically make games. And so rather than saying, hey, you just need to make a new style, let's find a way where we can remove the aspect of you even deciding whether you want to make a new style or not. And so those things, by limiting what materials they can use or finding challenges that are, will force their hand, is really what I'm going to try to do in that class. And I specifically set the class up in a classroom that is not the traditional illustration classroom. because I don't want them to have some perception that things are going to be the same. And so by saying, okay, instead of this just being in a, some lovely studio desks, we're going to put this in a room where we have easels and we have, so you can't always be on your iPad, or you couldn't always be at a studio desk that's flat and, has very little wiggle room to try new things. And it'll be interesting to see. And some of this is the type of student that we end up with. And I think this happens in a lot of art schools is they all kind of want to do the same thing. And they look at each other and they go, oh, that's really cool. I should do that. Or there's an industry that they all aim for. Like right now there's, and I assume that Chris, you have this, the same issue of everybody in the world wants to be a character designer. And it's like, that's cool, but there's only so much room for new character designers, and it's not always a job that you get right out of school. And so how do we make that something that, or how do we do something that's new and interesting? And so like the equivalent of, as an example, one of the things I've been stressing students, and part of this is because of the way that I work, but like we have a lot of people that want to do, or back in the day, we had a lot of folks that really wanted to do viz dev, like concept art for video games and things of the sort. And I understand that there are lots of people that want to do that. And oftentimes it's, hey, I want to do that. That's why I'm working in Procreate, and my work looks like, everything that's out there in the industry right now. I need to go match that. And I would almost venture the other way and go, okay, everybody out there is trying to do the same thing. So let's go and say, can you do concept art for a video game, but instead of doing 3D rendering and things of that sort, what happens if you come back and you go, I'm going to do something that's a collage version of a mech? Or what happens if I'm going to use found object and make a collage out of wood that is, and I say collage meaning like a constructed object that is made out of found materials, sort of like what's it called, kit bashing, but maybe with unconventional materials. So it's not just models that you're playing with. And can you find a way to incorporate some of that into an industry that generally is 3D modeling and excuse me, digital rendering? And in turn, will that set you apart from everybody else? And so like those are the kind of questions that I want to ask these students and say, okay, I'm going to throw out this idea of you want to go into this industry, but let's go look at everybody else and go, okay, are you actually just following a preordained script, or are you actually like being inventive and doing something that's unexpected that sets you apart? I mean, if there's 100,000 people that want to go into that industry and one person comes out and does something that's wildly different than everybody else, maybe it's, I will say maybe it's not always the best thing in the world, but they're going to stand out. One of the things I show students, like I still have them make some postcards and do some promotional materials, just not that everybody needs to send out a postcard, but that idea of like, it's important that they understand the process. And so like what is involved in doing some of those like media projects that require printing and things of that sort. And one of the things that I always show them is everybody wants to do a 4x6 postcard because a 4x6 postcard is cheap and it's standard. And then I take the stack of 4x6 postcards that I have from all these previous students, and I put one 5x7 postcard in that mix. And I go, okay, which one are you going to look at first? And because there's one that's bigger than every other card that's in there and sticks out on all sides by like a half an inch, or, depending on how to put together, an inch on two sides, it clearly is something that you're going to look at. And so just by rethinking size alone, you can get some really like interesting takes on how to stand out from the crowd itself. And so like if I can get the kids, and I say kids, but they're young, they're kids to me. If I can get them to think about these ideas in a way that goes beyond just I'm doing this because that's what's standard, then I achieve my goal for that class. I just laid out basically the semester for everybody, and then it's a matter of just getting the assignments. I would love to hear at some point from folks. I don't know if anybody would ever want to share this, but like if they were going through school and they took illustration courses, what were the fun courses that were sort of out there that you weren't expecting to like, or that you found value in later in life? And like the equivalent of, I always say to my students, there was a painting course that I took that I did bad in the painting part. I thought I was really good, and the teacher gave me a bad grade, and I look back on it and I go, I understand why they gave me a bad grade. But the thing that I took away from that class was not the painting. The thing I took away from the class later on in life, I realized, is I learned how to light a still life. And like that wasn't the intention of the class. In no way did I sign up for still life lighting 101. But that was the thing that really like registered with me later on in life and was very helpful for me as a teacher when I was teaching some drawing courses, is to sit there and go, oh, let's make a still life here and know how to light it so it really does what I need it to do. And so that idea of there's courses that you take and when you're going through it may not feel relevant, and then 10 years later you go, oh, that's the most important class I ever took. So Matthew Bergs, no. 4x6 postcards are good. Don't get me wrong. They are cheaper. They're cheaper to send. There's nothing wrong with a 4x6 card. However, I will state a larger card, which is more expensive and costs you a lot more money, requires you to, it stands out because of size, but there are other things that you can do with a card that's going to make it stand out. What you want to do is you want something that grabs attention. So scale is one factor, but like production cost, like I have a student who did this really beautiful card with spot gloss on it. Or not, it was a business card. It was a business card, but beautiful spot gloss on it. It was like black with black spot gloss and this like really vibrant red. And the whole thing, like when you put it in your hand, you're just like, oh man, this thing is beautiful. And was it any more complicated or a different size or anything of the sort for anybody else's? No, but it was one that made me stop and look at it. And that's the goal. And so the scale is only a quick, easy demonstration of why you should consider different variables than just standard. But that doesn't mean that it is in any way, that scale is in any way the answer to how to get attention. I have to back that up real quick. Bookbinding class, great. That is one. Yeah, we having people to do that. Yeah, knowing how to do like signatures and how books are constructed, especially for Kidlit, is huge. I had a shop class at Art Center. It was get us all familiar with tools, and the assignments were brutal. Taught me lots about paying attention to craftsmanship. Yes. Graphics composition class. One of the courses I really loved when I was in school, or not courses, but one of the things I learned when I was in school that I actually learned from my dad, but I think would be great for students, is truly just a presentation class. One of the things that I have students always talk to me, like I had a student recently come to me with concerns about like they don't think their work is good enough and all these like, downer sentiments about sort of like their work, and they didn't want to show it to people because they thought it was not up to par with what they think they can do and blah, blah, blah. And in reality, their work is lovely. But the thing that I had to stress to them is, give me a little doodle on a napkin, and I can teach you how to put it together in a frame so it looks like it's the most important napkin you've ever seen. And some of that is like scale. Some of that is the presentation of said image. But that idea of like, just because it is not completely finished, or like it's a sketch. Some people are like, I don't want to show my sketches because they're not finished, or they don't feel as like thought out as everything else. But like, there was a time where we were went to a show. Robert McCloskey, who, if you don't know, you should know, who did Make Way for Ducklings, who did Blueberries for Sal, all these like classic kidlit literature things. They came and there was a show of his work. Not they. There's a show. He's long gone. at this point, but there was a show of his work at the local art museum here in Boston at the MFA, and we went to it, and the actual finished work. The thing that I liked the most was the pieces that had little notes on the side of them that said, like, fix this color here, change this thing, adjust this, blah, blah, blah. It was basically like seeing behind the curtain. Oh, no. Okay, so is my phone? That's the question. Let me check my phone. Hold on 1 second. As long as my phone can stay, I'm going to switch my phone. If people can still hear me, I'm going to switch my phone to. Am I still going, Lauren? Okay. I hope people are still hearing me. I'm on LTE now, which hopefully should continue to carry. Our Wi-Fi dropped for a hot second here. But what I was talking about, like going to the Robert McCloskey show, was seeing his sketches and his notes on the side. I think were more rewarding than seeing. No, I think. Okay, can everybody hear me? Okay, tell me if you can hear me. Okay, assuming you can. I had a thing saying location services on my phone, and whenever that screen pops up that says it does. Okay, it keeps reaching. Teacher Marin, yes, it will be back up in a second if you can hear me. It will be back up in a second. Give me a minute. Give me a minute. Tell me when the Wi-Fi is back, Lauren. It's back? Okay, I'm going to go back on. Okay, I'm back on Wi-Fi. I'm back on Wi-Fi. Can people hear me okay? Julian Subik says it is fine. Okay, so I'm going to keep rolling. I don't have much left that I'm going to do on this tonight, so I'm plus we're getting to the time where it's going to cut me off in about 13 minutes anyways. I just want to redo this this little goatee of sorts. This is trying to figure out how to make this look. He's got a little goatee. And maybe start to edge it up too. a little beard there. Let me go to live on this. There we go. Okay, sorry, I hope that didn't mess with too many people's sense of what's going on here. I do think I want to use. I've found that Posca markers, especially certain ones, like if I've used them enough, they start to get a little bit less. They may not put out as much paint, but it also means I can like soften things because it's sort of like doing a little bit of like a dry brush on edges. So like where I have these little hints of clouds, it can make a difference in sort of creating that edge. Let's see, a little touch there. Are there other questions from folks as we got the last few minutes here before I wrap up for the night? If you have questions, throw them in that comments. Let me answer those questions for you. I realize I like this beard, but I want it to be a little longer in a couple months. I'm going to extend this out. Who is on next week? Good question. Look at you coming through with those, this teacher mirror, coming through with those hot topics of the night. Next week is Edwardian Taylor, who worked on, what? Same time, yes, 8 p.m. Thursday, Edwardian Taylor. And then I have to start working soon, whether it be this weekend or at some point on the next batch for the next month. I think we're booking out like into June. We're still working on some in May, but we have some folks lined up. We got some names coming. Some real hot tickets, as the kids say. But yes, I'm very, very excited for all of them. Edwardian Taylor has, if you get a chance, look up his work. He did a lot. Josh Funk, who is a guy that's in local here, wrote a bunch of books that Edwardian Taylor has worked on. I'm going to get the name wrong right now, of course. This isn't the three. No, what are the title of the books? Lauren, help me. Edwardian Taylor's books with Josh Funk. Not the Three Little Pigs. Yeah, it's not. I was trying to figure out the it's not. The Three Little Pigs. It's not. Little Red Riding Hood. And so they're all sort of like based on fairy tales and whatnot, but sort of a twist on those that are really lovely and fun. And so that should be good to have him on. A very, very good character designer. Matthew Bergs, have I ever gone to a children's book fair in Bologna, Italy? No, and I want to go. You're going to attend no fair. I think that it is a little cost prohibitive. Let's put it that way. I don't know if I can, on a whim, especially with teaching and things that I got to do for. I forget what time is it during the school year? I can't remember when it is. But I would at some point I want to go. At some point I think I will go, but not this year. And everybody. I feel like it's the place to go. There's a couple things in the U.S. that are fun, like going to the American Library Association and going to some of those like events. But yeah, getting out to Bologna would be amazing. So someday I'll be famous and can do that. Some little eyebrows there. What mediums am I using for this piece of good work you are doing now? Is this for a children's book? No, this is not for a children's book. None of these Thursday night ones are. I feel like at some point I'm going to get into a crunch period where I'm going to have to do some kidlit piece on here that's intended for a picture book, but I try to stay away from, as much as possible, try to stay away from doing stuff on here that is intended for commercial projects. And one, because there's only so much you can show with a commercial project that the publisher will allow you to show, because they don't want to show everything. And so I'm hesitant to like go and put that process on. But also there is the challenge of not challenge, but one of the things that I'm a little bit more cognizant of, thoughtful of, is this is a time for me to be able to play. And if I start doing work on this that is intended for real projects, then all of a sudden this becomes something that just becomes potentially work and not fun. And so I want to keep it in that same sort of fun ballpark. Okay, last couple touches here. Can I show you my workstation? Oh, JuneCivic.art. You're not asking the right person. I will do a quick sweep so you can see, but it's going to be a quick sweep because it is messy. It is a nightmare of mess. The other side, here, I'll just do this. I'll take it out of this. It's also got collage papers all over the place here. Posca markers, glue, colored pencils, all my papers. This is supposed to be standing upright, but the desk has shifted. My water, paints, brushes. There's a bunch of paintings in the background. There's a bunch of storage that shouldn't be there. It is a wild mess in this room. So don't ask me how to make it look clean, because this studio needs a deep cleaning at this point. So here's what I'm gonna do, because I think I'm done. I think I'm at a point where I can just sort of walk away clean. What? Stage it? That's what I'm gonna try to do real quick. So I'm gonna move some stuff out of the way. I'm gonna try to stage this real quick, and I'll take a photo of it for you, Lauren. But this is my Alfred Bolt Top Stormalong, who is a folk tale for the ages. So this is my piece for the night. Anyways, I will. Hold on. My wife is telling me to line it up. She doesn't like my arrangement right now. And so I will. I'll get it all nice and clean, and I'll pull some of these pencils, and I'll make it look all pretty like they put on the internet. On the internet. Let me pull some of these colors and put them out here. That one wasn't really used. Glue stick, a couple pasta markers, and then the colors that I used were this kind of stuff. Let's get some of those out there. I'll try to get this all lined up in a lovely way. Something like this. So again, if you're tuning in late and you haven't seen how this came to be, go back and into my feed, and watch this from the beginning. Can I get that so it doesn't roll off? Maybe. Ooh, I can do this. Hey, there's an eraser. There's some gouache. The one downside to this is it's curling that way. So let's see if I can get rid of that curl a little bit for you. Only got a couple minutes. Let me see. Can I anti-curl that? Okay, that might have to be it. Somewhere in that range. All right, that may be it for the night. You all have a lovely week. I will be back. I should put the star of the show generally is these suckers, my scissors. Can I get them in there in some way? Maybe I need to pull out a little bit tighter. Or not tighter. No, I guess I can't really pull out much more than that. Oh, wait, can I? No, I can zoom. Oh, there I go. Okay, that's better. I'll move this down. Staging, staging, staging. Get this staging correct. There was one other color that I used that is a cheap paint, but it was part of this piece. There we go. Amsterdam brand acrylics. All right. You all have a lovely night. I will be back next week on Thursday with Edwardian Taylor. Bye, everybody.